Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. We have a full agenda. We also have, I think, 28 people signed up for public comment. Please remember the rules of decorum. Each person has 2 minutes to speak this evening. I'm going to ask, out of respect for others, that you do not go over your time. Also, please remember, be kind. Starting with Christina Jones. We could get, okay.
8005 Finland Drive. Resident concerns is the job. Community engagement is the job. Saying that you want to meet people where they are during the campaign when you've not done that at all for the last 3 years while in office is lip service. Since February 4th, 2020, I have spent my time making sure you knew that there were concerns in the community that you chose to ignore. Our goal was not to allow your vote to ignore us, define our 40-year history. What you thought would be a quick transition into obscurity has proven to be a growing network of residents who want to be a part of their government. It was a disastrous decision because everything you do needs to be rooted in community engagement. To pretend that any council who refuses to meet with their constituency has their best interest at heart is insanity. We kept CACs alive and part of the conversation through your lies about us, through your attempt to disband us, and through the extra time you gave yourselves in office. Community engagement is action, not an afterthought. What actions have you done to connect and truly listen to our city's residents? We've listened to you promise something amazing for almost 3 years now. We've watched you campaign to be the one who cares about resident concerns, but failed to turn your words into meaningful action. Our hope is that whoever is elected to serve next Tuesday remembers that it is the residents' voice that put them in leadership role, and it is the residents' voice that can take it away. See you next Tuesday.
I'm actually going to call 10 people up and ask them to come to the podium so we can quicken the pace. So I'm going to ask Michael Stevenson, Lisa Huguet, Del Monte Crawford, Andrea Fennell, Octavia Rainey, Angel Turner, DeQuanta Copeland, Chaz Moore, and Frank Halima to come up. Michael, you're next.
Good evening. Michael Stevenson, 210 East Forest Drive, Raleigh. I just want to speak about townhomes. I've been hearing a lot of alarming statements about our neighborhoods, the future of our neighborhoods, and much of it is about townhomes. I just want to say they're not going to harm our neighborhoods. They're not going to destroy our neighborhoods. The neighborhood where I live, Cameron Park, has had townhomes for 100 years, and we've had many more new ones built all around us. They've only made the neighborhood better. They've increased the housing diversity and the vibrancy. They're a traditional building type. We see them in all the historical neighborhoods and cities across the South, and history has shown that they happily coexist with single-family homes and other small-scale development. What you're doing with Missing Middle is very important as part of a national discussion having to do with exclusionary single-family zoning that was a product of the 20th century when there was seemingly endless cheap land and cheap petroleum. We know that's no longer the case. We have to change how we build our cities. What you're doing is very much in the spirit of that. It's also very much in the spirit of the Housing Development Toolkit developed by the Obama administration and published in 2016. What you're doing is joining many other cities and states across the country to build a better, more inclusive future for our city, and I urge you to continue along that path. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Huguet.
Lisa Hewitt, 712 Hinsdale Street. Tonight, I'd like to educate residents who have not yet voted and tell them why I oppose the parks bond. Raleigh has great parks and a beautiful greenway, and many are excited about the projects included in this bond, but the timing is all wrong. Many in our city are experiencing significant financial hardships, stagnant wages, soaring food and housing costs, and people are being pushed out of their homes by rampant development. My opposition is about priorities and funding. We all agree that Raleigh has a severe affordable housing crisis, a shortfall of some 40,000 units. The recent $80 million bond for housing is barely making a dent. Last year, 110 units were created by purchasing a hotel, yet we are losing 2,500 affordable units per year. To rent a one-bedroom apartment, you need to make $54,000 in order not to be cost burdened, which means spending less than 30% of your income on housing. Today, more than a third of this city are cost burdened, with many spending more than 50% of their income on housing. I oppose this bond because it is extremely out of proportion with our needs in housing. I also oppose this bond because with Raleigh's AAA excellent bond rating, there are many other funding sources that they can tap into without raising your property taxes and your rent. Yes, renters, you will still be paying for this bond with increased rent. As a property owner, my taxes will go up at least $200 just for the parks bond. For alternative funding, the city can leverage tax increment financing, installment financing, or lease obligation funds. They can also pull from ongoing hospitality taxes. All of this helps to shift the load of paying for public infrastructure away from those who are least able to pay for it. I'm asking residents to vote no on the parks bond and asking the city to invest more in affordable housing and seek other funding for parks. Thank you.
Del Monte Crawford.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Madam Mayor Baldwin. Before I proceed, David Knight, you asked a question, did I go to Hedingham? The answer is yes. I stand today in solidarity with the residents of Hedingham, and I'm asking for your recusal, Madam Mayor, of the Raleigh mass shooting. In order to heal, you need to step down from your post, and just as you've allowed the federal government to assess the 28% of Black residents, you need to do the same for Hedingham. You've stated that greenways are our salvation, but where's the salvation for Nicole Connors, Sammy, and the other Raleigh 5 victims? Where's the NAACP when Miss Angel, Nicole's friend, suffers from PTSD and is afraid to leave her home? Where's the federal government for Tracy Howard, who had to get Nicole's body to Ohio, and Sammy, the family dog burial arrangements? Mary Ann Baldwin, I'm calling you out this evening and stand with the people in this room. Recuse yourself, or the people of Raleigh will do it for you. May we have a moment of silence for the Raleigh 5. We are Raleigh strong. Thank you.
Next, we have Andrea Fennell.
How are you? I am here to address you this time, sir. I spoke to you, Mr. Knight, about Hedingham, and you said good for you when I asked you, did you go there? That's what he said, y'all. Good for you. So what needs to be good for you is not in that seat. That would be good for you. Next, you.
Excuse me.
Next,
Let's
you.
be respectful of one another.
Stop my time when you speak.
We will stop your time.
Okay.
But I don't appreciate, neither does anybody here, those type of outbursts. We're here to show. You're talking about love, and respect.
Are you
But
speaking
yeah,
to me?
you're-
Because I'm
No,
still speaking.
but you're not showing it. So please,
Reclaiming her time.
we have her time. Don't worry about it. Okay,
Why are you
thank
so
you.
angry? I mean, we're just talking to
I'm
you.
not.
That's it.
I
And when
just-
I was up there earlier, I was watching you
You can
again,
start
and you
the
were
time
not.
again.
Thank you. And you were not paying attention yet again. I do have pictures of you not paying attention. You are to pay attention when people are speaking, not to look down like you're doing now. You can write later, not now. What I've been going through, going over there to Hedingham, I have not seen any one of y'all over there, not a one. I'm looking in every one of your eyes. I'm scooting past you because I was able to speak to Jonathan at least, but none of y'all. But with you, what you said to me is good for you. When I said, well, did you go to Hedingham? How is that to speak to the people who you are supposed to be representing? And you're asking for a vote. If you vote for him, I wouldn't do it because he don't care about Raleigh residents. Because he told me good for you when I said, where were you? When I was over there every day. I don't even live in Raleigh at all. But I do come to Raleigh because I care about residents here. I grew up in Raleigh. So that's why I come here. I spend time here. My mother lives in Raleigh. And I'm looking at you. I know you don't like it, but I'm going to speak directly to you because you directly spoke that mess to me. So you need to get up and get out of that seat because you're not for Raleigh residents. You're for your pockets only, you and your friend that sit next to you. You want to take money for developers. You want to take away zoning. You want to do all of that so you can bring and make it pretty, but without the people, how pretty is that going to be? You don't care about the people. Just admit it. You don't. You care about your pockets. You lined your pockets, Marianne, with those bonds, all of that you think we're going to push? We're not.
Thank
Vote
you.
no for the bonds. Vote no for you, especially you.
Octavia Rainey.
Good afternoon. My name is Octavia Rainey. I'm here to speak about 2008. In 2008, we had over 30 murders in the city of Raleigh. In 2008, I buried 12 of the black men. It was a total of 17 killed in Southeast Raleigh. I buried 12. And it was painful to me, and I'm still not over it from 2008. What I'm here to ask this city council is that I looked at your website, and for Hedingham, you have all kinds of counseling. But in 2008, we had a total of 17 black men that was buried. 12 of them I buried with Haywood Funeral Home, James West, and former Councilman Brad Thompson. You have the reports of that. I could have run off a thorough report, but I did not. What I'm asking you is two things. When people are killed in Raleigh, period, we need to have that website up, available to all of Raleigh. Because when you lose a loved one, someone close to you, when our kids are impacted by that, elderly, and including myself, it is just painful. And I have not recovered yet. But if we had counseling in 2008, 2009, 2010, I don't think we would be in this situation today because people suffer. And when you lose someone and they are killed, it hurts. It really hurt me to bury 12 black men. I didn't bury the whole 17 or my team with Haywood Funeral Home, but I buried 12 of them. So your webpage need to reflect all of Raleigh. Resources need to be put out there for all of Raleigh because kids are
you.
impacted by this.
Thank you, Octavia. Angel Turner.
Hello.
Hello.
I live on 5329 Sahaley Way. I'm going to tell you a story, and I hope you listen close, each and every one of you. I have severe PTSD. I heard my friend get gunned down. There was nothing. Marianne, could you please look at me?
I'm taking
I
some
need
notes.
the whites of your eyes. My friend was gunned down, and nobody, not one person sit in your seat, came to my door. I have a disabled granddaughter who I rushed to get in the home that day. And as I was closing my garage door, I heard my friend get gunned down. There was nothing I could do to save her. There's still nothing I can do to save her, it seems like, because you're not there. There are times when I just sit outside my garage because I have nothing else to do but wait on Nicole. Who are you waiting on? I don't need another Greenway. We had neighbors killed on a Greenway. We need mental health resources because we are stripped now. We are stripped. My granddaughter, who can't even tell me verbally what's wrong with her, has outbursts at school. I just finished her IEP today, and the first thing they said is she has to see a psychologist. She can't verbalize. She can't tell me, her grandmother, what's hurting, what's ailing her. She sits outside every morning and waits for Nicole. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, every one of you. The call is to serve, and you have not served. I've gotten mailers in my mailbox. I had to empty Nicole's mailbox while Tracy was gone to bury his wife, where there's a bullet hole. And Corey, your mailer was there, but you were not there.
Okay, thank you. DeQuanta Copeland.
We ready? Okay, thank you. Good evening. I am DeQuanta Copeland, one of the mayoral candidates here in Raleigh. And I stand today disappointed because as my friend just poured out her heart, Marianne, you stated that you've partnered with the NAACP and Moms Demand Justice to call in the feds to identify high crime areas and who is likely to commit a crime. We do not need the feds in Raleigh to further hurt the families that are already suffering. But what we do need is mental health resources. Could the feds tell you that little Austin was gonna stab his brother, then shoot him, and go through the neighborhood with a sawed-off rifle and kill all those innocent people? Because that was not your focus. Please stop destroying our Black communities with your hate, with what you feel inside of you. Black people deserve to live in Raleigh. The urban community is here and we're not going anywhere. And it's not fair. And I'm asking you in your last few days of office to be human. See us as humans. Know that we hurt. Know that we deserve love. And one day, I pray that when you're sitting in a place of extreme need, that is one of us that you have to reach your hand up to. And I pray that person have a heart to reach out and grab yours. Because the hurt that our neighborhoods are feeling right now from this council and the lack of judgment and the humility that has not been shown. You guys have had 3 years to prove to Raleigh that you did not care about us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chaz Moore.
Good evening, City Council, Madam Mayor, Madam City Manager. I know everyone's familiar with this because it's on the City of Raleigh website, but I'm just going to take part. City of Raleigh will prioritize racial equity to dismantle policies and systems that have created and sustained these inequities. Next. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just one department. This is not the entire city of Raleigh, but one department in 2022 spent $130,000 on 4th of July and about $20,000 on Juneteenth. Next year, so we now know that Juneteenth is going to be a holiday. So next year, our plan for Raleigh for one department is $200,000 for the 4th of July. And next slide, thank you. So equity and equitable spending. So City of Raleigh will spend $200,000 for the 4th of July holiday 2023. This does not include salaries, advertising, or logistics. Next year, they will increase the budget $69,000, which I went to the Dorothea Dix. It was awesome. It was amazing. So like, I'm glad it is, but that's a 53% increase. If you combine 2022 and 2023, we did not even spend $60,000 on Juneteenth. So the city of Raleigh's commitment is upwards of $250,000 for the 4th of July holiday. Next slide. I asked for information on a couple of different things, and this is what we have. We spent $15,000 on Christmas lights at one park. Let's go to the next slide because I don't have a lot of time. So our nonprofit paid $3,200 to the city of Raleigh, and then an additional $4,000 that was mandated. So I'm here to ask for funding. With our nonprofit for Juneteenth for next year and the year after that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have somebody follow up. Okay, thank you. Frank Halima.
Frank Helema. I also have a visual that should come up. Okay. 926 Williamson Drive. I hold in my hand an announcement from the City of Raleigh received about 2 weeks ago with the heading, Learn More About the Pigeon House Branch Watershed Study. If council can send a postcard about and hold a meeting regarding the Pigeon House watershed, why haven't you gotten it together to send postcards to the owners of the 30,000 land parcel holders in the frequent transit area? Because of your failure to notify homeowners in the frequent transit areas of the potential to have an apartment building pop up next to their American dream, Restore Raleigh Zoning has undertaken an effort to meet your responsibility for you by placing the door hangers in the visual on properties in or near the frequent transit areas. And why haven't you been able to get it together to hold community outreach meetings in all council districts about the radical changes in zoning to single-family neighborhoods due to the missing middle text changes that became effective August 8? ABC 11 News in the last few days has reported that, quote, there will be opportunity for additional community engagement on this topic, but residents will have to wait until after the holidays to weigh in. A meeting is planned for early next year. Apparently, after the holidays has become a euphemism for after the elections. I suspect that you know darn well that the more citizens living in single-family neighborhoods learn about your implementation of the missing middle, the less they're going to like it. You're kicking this can far enough down the road that newly elected council members who did not vote for this radical machete hacking of a map style of the missing middle will be on the hook for explaining it. You conspired with minimal public engagement to break the treaty of zoning protections homeowners had with this city that protected their American dream to live in a neighborhood of
Thank you.
single-family homes
Your
with
time is up.
yards.
Next, we have.
I know,
Nick
you've asked that we...
Neptune. Your time is up. Thank you. Next, we have Nicholas Neptune, Tim Niles, Haley Kinsler, Thomas Berry, Joshua Bradley, Shane Collins, Byron Laws, Terry Anderson. We could stand in form line. So the next person up is Nick Neptune.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Stewart, distinguished members of City Council. My name is Nick Neptune. I reside in District C, Southeast Raleigh, 209 Haywood Street. Nearly 20 years ago, I moved to the Triangle in pursuit of a higher education. For the last 12, I've called Raleigh home, owing to great friends, great communities, and having had great places to live. And on that note, just over 3 years ago, I appeared before the City Council to speak in favor of detached accessory dwelling units, the affordable housing bond, and missing middle housing reforms being considered during a series of public hearings on the various issues. Since those public hearings, the City Council has advanced an affordable housing bond, updated our development code to allow for more housing options, adopted an equitable development around transit plan, and in more recent months, adopted the city's first major Greenway master plan update since 1989, worked with city park staff on a safety and security study of our greenways, and is now advancing a major reinvestment in our parks and greenways through our 2022 Parks Bond and equity-driven investment in over 20-plus parks and trails across the city designed to maintain and improve our quality of life. And during that time, as I have participated and volunteered in the city's community engagement process, I have moved into an affordable, detached, accessory dwelling unit, a type of missing middle housing made possible by this council. In the context of being one of the fastest growing cities and regions in this country, I wish to express my gratitude and encouragement.
Campaign, he didn't respond. He did respond within an hour to someone's tweet about recycling old yard waste containers now banned in Raleigh. I asked him about recycling polystyrene in the same tweets. He never responded. I sent him a direct message tweet to explain a traffic study can be done with multiple scenarios when he didn't seem to understand that. He never replied. He must use Twitter's mute function to silence those he disagrees with. He blocks voices instead of listening to them. Today is 999 days since you defunded CACs without public notice or input. IndieWeek said, quote, after 3 years, City Council has failed to deliver any kind of meaningful replacement for CACs, unquote. Your actions say more about you than the campaign rhetoric written for you by your PR experts. Lastly, yes, missing middle housing can be good for everyone when it's implemented to promote affordability. In Raleigh, it was implemented to maximize developer profits with no requirements or incentives for affordability. As you go to vote, please consider what these councilors do and not what they say when you make your decision. Thank you.
Next we have Haley Kinsler.
Madam Mayor, I understand that folks at home have no audio of our proceedings.
Can we check on that? Okay, we're checking.
Don't make me speak if they can't hear me online.
Could we set that at 2 minutes, please? Okay,
You want me to go ahead?
please.
All right. Haley Kinsler, 84 Gorman Street, Apartment C. I didn't prepare anything in advance, y'all. I'm a graduate student during campaign season, and it's rough. But what I do want to say is that I want to bring up redistricting. For those of you who are not familiar, the city undergoes a redistricting process every 10 years along with the census. And this last year, the current council, everybody who's sitting before you, got to vote on which map we selected for redistricting. So 55,419 people were redistricted with the map that they voted on, 12% of the population of Raleigh. Of that 55,000, 55% of the people were people of color. In District B, which was a majority-minority district and still manages to be a majority-minority district, barely, 70% of the people redistricted were people of color. Regardless of where we stand on housing or transit or any other issue, we should all be able to agree that voter suppression is wrong. And if you have to change the lines and change the maps, because it used to be that the Green Road Community Center was in District B. Now, there's no early voting location in District B. I wonder why that is. Y'all changed the rules to make it easier for you to stay in office. That's the fact of the matter. You changed to a plurality election behind closed doors. You gave yourself 13 additional months in office, and then you redistricted 55,000 people, and out of one district, 70% of those people were people of color. No matter how you put it, the numbers do not lie. and you cracked that district to retain your power. And I think that's wrong. I don't care about your policies. Voter suppression is wrong, no matter which way you put it. It's always wrong. All right. Thanks, y'all. Please vote on Tuesday, November 8th.
Thank you. Tom Barry.
Good evening, Tom Barry, 811 North Bloodworth Street, Professor of Architecture at NC State, and Director of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Initiative. In Raleigh, like other dynamic, growing U.S. cities, fights are raging over how to grow and provide more housing. The battles are often about missing middle housing in neighborhoods close to city centers. Raleigh, like many U.S. cities, is low density, with mostly single-family houses on large lots, including our inner and first-ring neighborhoods. Like many U.S. cities, it has adopted a missing middle ordinance for appropriate zoning districts. As one of the fastest-growing cities in America, City Council knows it urgently needs to build more diverse, compact, multi-use neighborhoods in areas best served by public transit. There are many challenges. Funding to build and subsidize housing is inadequate to meet our needs. In America, housing is another market economy product dominated by national firms. Their economic models often produce the generic outcomes that make most nervous, including me, though some cities are recognizing that they can also be allies. One effective way to stabilize housing costs is simply to build more housing. And compact, transit-friendly communities are essential to create a sustainable future. Many are committed to the fight for equitable and sustainable development. Change is inevitable. I know that Mordecai, where I live, will grow. I, along with others, support City Council's commitment to smart, equitable growth and the common good. Thank you.
Josh Bradley.
At the reader's phase of my life.
We understand.
Josh Bradley, 1324 Springlawn Court. Good evening. I've just got a couple of things I want to talk about. First, I would like to ask you currently on the council and all the other candidates out there running for city council to make a pledge to recuse yourselves from any any zoning decisions involving people whose companies and contractors have donated to your campaigns. I pledge this if I'm elected. It would reduce any appearance of being bought by the developers. When the majority on this council approved the rezoning in downtown South against the unanimous opposition of the Planning Commission, every councilor that voted in support had received significant donations from John Kane and associated people. To make it appear that they had been bought by Kane Realty. This would have been avoided if everyone who received significant donations recused themselves during the vote. Another way to avoid the travails of this would be to make municipal elections publicly funded. People should be elected on their beliefs and policies rather than how much money they raised. And it would make sure that everyone would be represented, not just the wealthy donor class. Secondly, I want to make a point on missing middle. The reason for the outrage is less about density and more about engagement and affordability. People want to be heard even if it does not necessarily get their desired outcome. People are throwing around terms like NIMBY and YIMBY when the large majority of candidates in this race support density and acknowledge the reality of growth as long as it is affordable, close to transit, environmentally friendly. Remember, without workers in the city cannot function. Affordability for folks who do the work to make our city run should be first on everybody's agenda. And one final note, I just wanted to let everybody know that I am running for city council at large, and I will be on the ballot this year. And regardless of who you vote for, please vote from the bottom up. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Shane Collins. Shane Collins.
Mayor and council, appreciate your time. Shane Collins, 1205 Country Ridge, 27609, North Hills Man, 888 on Instagram. I'm here to ask for respect. RESPECT.
Do you have the music
Just
to go
like
with it, though?
Aretha Franklin, yes, yes. And I'm here to offer a solution for our underpaid city workers, plus police and fire. Everyone needs respect, RESPECT, and that begins with responsible pay and rewards. Sorry. My phone took off on me. It's not respecting me. Oh. Sorry. Everyone needs respect, and that begins with responsible pay and rewards. There must be a way of setting up a fund to incentivize young workers who complete training and do good work. This applies to city workers, your trash workers. There's so many city workers, plus the police and the fire who don't stay in this city because they can't afford to. They go to other places, other cities, other townships, and they get a bonus. Bonuses might be an option. We could ask businesses to contribute funds to sustain an incentive program to encourage retention of successful employees. The businesses benefit from the growth, which taxes our police and fire and city workers.
Shane, your time is up.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Vote November 8th. Livable Raleigh.
Thank you. Next, Byron Laws.
Good evening. I'm Byron Laws, District C resident. Pretty much, when I signed up, I feel like the website said 3 minutes, and then I got the email saying 2. So once again, our voices are being limited. Also, I was a vice chair of the South Central CAC, which is Roberts Park. The day before you all got rid of the CACs, one of your staff had delivered some koozies and some notebooks for us to use at an upcoming event. We had planned our events for the year, and I was delivered a box full of materials that I didn't have nobody to give them to anymore or anybody to come to those meetings because you all took that opportunity away from us. I also am a member of the Human Relations Commission here with the City of Raleigh. We received an email last week where our current president was not reappointed for her last term. When I joined the Human Relations Commission, shout out to Councilmember Cox, he was at every meeting. Since then, we don't see y'all at our meetings, our representative. When District C Councilmember Branch would hold his meetings, I attended those, as scheduled. It's hard to be confident in y'all as leaders. Y'all have continued to let us down. The young lady who spoke about redistricting, I work for a nonprofit in which we received an email from you all to let you all know about which maps were good and not. We gave y'all the information, y'all said in our face and laughed at us and made the decisions you made to move those 55,000 people. We sat here, I was here, standing right here. We told you all those maps are not fair, and you all still did what you did. It's tough, people hurting, and it really seems like y'all don't give 2 cents at all. Christina Jones is here every council meeting. Are y'all not tired of hearing her over and over and over fight for the people?
Hey, thank you.
Y'all, come on, man.
Thank you, Byron. Your time's up.
I stand with everybody doing y'all thing on the ground.
Byron.
I love this city, and we're going to make it happen. Appreciate
your time
y'all.
is up. Thank you. Next Next, I'm going to call the next group of people, Terry Henderson, Donna Bailey, Doug Johnson, Terry Snyder, Denise Fitzpatrick, Alexander Goldstein, Margie Case, Rob Steele, Dave Phillips, Zainab Baloch, and Jordan Forrest. So next is Terry Henderson.
Okay, thank you.
If you were asked what lessons you have learned as a mayor and council from the missing middle, I have no idea what you would say. However, here are the lessons for a new mayor and council. Number one, include a thorough citizen engagement among a wide cross-section of city residents, not just whoever zooms in during COVID. You mistook silence for consensus, and you're caught up in your own echo chamber. Number two, you did not evaluate the considerable negative aspects and unintended consequences of the missing middle experience elsewhere. Number three, you didn't have specific goals and expected outcomes for affordable housing from missing middle, just a scattershot, haphazard plan you hoped would eventually work. Hope is not a plan. Four, successful projects think big and start small. You took a machete approach when it needed a scalpel. A pilot project might have been the way to go. Number five, you didn't provide safeguards to keep speculators and developers from taking advantage and gaming the system. Number six, you didn't provide a cost-benefit analysis to help the public better understand the risks and rewards of such unprecedented and far-reaching legislation that you played down by calling them text changes. Number seven, you shirked your accountability by taking the City Council out of an important decision-making process and leaving it to administrative staff for which there is no notice, no hearing, no appeal. In the vacuum, it is developers who will make decisions about Raleigh's growth. Number eight, you ignored the architectural, historic, and cultural context of neighborhoods that have played a key part in what makes Raleigh desirable. You thought this was just about Hayes Barton, and you will see that you underestimated neighborhoods in every part of this city. You squandered the public's trust by taking away transparency for how you make decisions. Little public input, changing the election rules to favor yourself, closed meetings, extending your term, and accepting major contributions from developers seeking and getting favorable treatment. Your leadership has been lazy and clumsy.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Next, we have
You're
Donna
trying
Bailey.
to copy Portland and Minneapolis and Seattle. We've got our own requirements in Raleigh.
I have some visuals. Can I have those up? Right. And whose changes it? Who advances the slide? Can someone tell me? You do. Okay, so I just say slide and you advance it. Okay. Okay.
Could we start over, please?
Oh.
Two.
Thank you. Donna Bailey, 710 Rosemont Avenue. The mayor and other councilors say that affordable housing is their number one concern. Let's take a look at the smoke and mirrors going on here. This first slide shows that in fiscal year 21-22, the most recent, council has failed for the third year in a row to meet the paltry goal of providing 570 affordable housing units. This council only accomplished providing 156 units, 27% of their goal. I give that an F. Next slide is information provided by Larry Jarvis from Housing and Neighborhoods. The last 10 years of housing statistics show the net loss of affordable housing is over 4,000 units a year. Next slide. The last slide shows the city's goal, their actual affordable units added, and the actual number of units lost. This is pretty astounding. The blanket missing middle that this council passed is too broad and only helps the developers who are building luxury housing. The only way missing middle will truly help alleviate our housing crisis is if affordable housing is incentivized. But the Raleigh missing middle is designed to maximize profits for developers with no incentives for affordability. However, the development community has a very good return on their investment with this council. They have a lot of money to donate to candidates that support unfettered growth. Baldwin has raised over $700,000. Over 75% of her donations come from the development community. For Knight and Melton, that figure is 70% of their campaign donations come from developers. Is your record on affordable housing something you can be proud of? The citizens of Raleigh need to elect independent counselors who will not enrich themselves and developers who work for all the
Donna, your
citizens of
time is
Raleigh.
up. Doug?
Hello, I'm Doug Johnston, 120 Forest Road. And I'm here tonight to discuss briefly what we do when we have that money for the parks. And I have prepared 2 short items, which I will send you. One is 3 ideas to supplement phase 1, which we're in on the park now, because there's going to be more park needs following that. And it suggests how bond revenues can have benefits in terms of producing more revenues. And that's enough said about that. But as Dix Park and John Chavis Park become the new center of Raleigh, we need to have a lot of money to keep that part of the city strong, along with the connectivity parts through the Greenway and so forth. Could I have the slides, please, speaking of the Greenway? Here's a picture of the Greenway, and then the next one, please. Oop, I got that. Sorry, let's try another. Did we miss the first one? Okay, well, we've jumped to green streets. The first picture was one that most people in the world probably know as a City of Raleigh Greenway, and it appeared in the New York Times with the story on Hedingham, the unfortunate story. But if it were up, you would see. Could you go back to that by any chance? Okay. Yeah, and is there another one along with it, or did I just foul up? Yeah, those are the 2 pictures. Thank you. You can look at them, I'm sure, later. I think they give you a good sense of the tranquility of the park and the Greenway.
Thank you, Doug. Terry Snyder?
I understand I have to advance these myself. Okay, good. Terry Snyder, 1316 Westfield Avenue. On October 6, 2021, following considerable controversy, you approved the rezoning of 26 acres above the Laurel Hills neighborhood and Azalea Falls for the development of high-density apartments and condos. There was significant community opposition because of anticipated negative impact on the environment. Also, the Planning Commission refrained from making a zoning recommendation to City Council either way. This slide shows the clear cutting done on the property above Azalea Falls and next to Laurel Hills. Next slide. This slide shows the clear running water of Azalea Falls before the excavation on the left and the muddy waters afterwards on the right. Slide 3 shows the creek with clear running water that runs through the Laurel Hills neighborhood and into Azalea Falls below before excavation, and the muddy water afterwards. The following March, after the excavation, the impacted neighbors contacted city staff regarding the damage caused by the runoff. Staff from the city's erosion control department made a site visit with the developer and confirmed that their erosion control measures were in compliance with the city-approved plan. The Raleigh Comprehensive Plan 2030 clearly states that it, quote, contains the policies and actions required to conserve, protect, and enhance Raleigh's natural resources. Slide 4. So what went wrong? Inappropriate use of the land, inadequate regulations to protect the environment, misinterpretation or misapplication of the regulations, total disregard of the policies of the comprehension plan. In any case, something needs to be done now to fix this in future rezonings and to conscientiously adhere to the plans that have been set forth. Maybe the best solution is to elect new leaders who will respect and enforce the guidelines.
Your time is up. Thank you. Next, we have Denise Fitzpatrick.
Good evening. I am Denise Newton Fitzpatrick. I am a fighter for civil rights, with us all having civil rights regardless of color or race. I am an activist with the ACLU, a member of the NAACP. I am an advocate. I stand here tonight to speak for the homeless community and those with mental illness who have no voice. Maybe they can't speak for themselves because of mental illness. We need more advocates and activists that are willing to go the extra mile to get this job done, to stand up for these people who may be less fortunate than you are. I watched a movie last night, Emmett Till, and that, of course, is civil rights violation. There's many forms of civil rights violations. There's many forms of different types of lynchings. We have mental lynching here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're talking about affordable housing. Wake County Human Services needs to stop violating the civil rights of the mentally ill and the homeless. I have a case right here. It's Public Records File 15 CVD 9292. Judge Ned Mangum found that Wake County Human Services denied Julian Glenn Coatley the right to affordable, safe, and decent housing because he has a mental disability. That violates the Civil Rights Act of 1968 as amended, which is the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. It violates Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, or Section 504. It violates constitutional rights because it involves a government entity. It violates many laws right here in Wake County. Wake County needs to stop violating the civil rights. Not only did they make housing unavailable for a member of a protected class who was supposed to be protected from illegal housing discrimination but was not. Not only did they do that, but they denied reasonable accommodation requests required by the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988.
Your time is up, Denise.
Stop.
Have you been to the Wake County Commission to speak?
I'm speaking with them, and I'm also speaking with some other elected officials. I was going to read the letters from Tom Tillis. I'm working with him. He's in agreement with me. So I'm working with a lot of people now, but I want to make this known.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Alexander Goldstein.
Hello, I'm one of the housing insecure people who lives in Raleigh. I barely make enough to get by. I grew up in a city where I literally saw the indicators that took place that eventually forced thousands of people out of their homes. And the city is Charlottesville, Virginia. It doesn't have many thousands of people to begin with, but it forced thousands of people out of their homes. And those same indicators are happening in Raleigh right now. Housing is a human right. Maybe you guys don't agree with that, but I doubt any of you would last if you were homeless, so you kind of have to. We need a housing guarantee, not like a token investment to include as a talking point, a guarantee, so we know what we're not going to get priced out of the places we live and end up on the street. We need that. I hate public speaking. I hate having to be here, yet I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Margie Case.
I'm sorry I couldn't make it the last time, and I appreciate your putting my remarks into the record and hearing me
Please
once
set the
again.
time, please.
And once again, I'm here to urge restoring Raleigh zoning to protect Raleigh neighborhoods. In passing the missing middle, whether by design or by accident, The City Council removed itself and the public from the process of making decisions about particular development proposals. The staff now reviews the proposals and works out the details with developers. There is no place for the City Council or public input or involvement. However, while public input addresses part of the problem, it's not the only problem. Missing middle is a fad, and you aren't paying attention to the problems it's causing elsewhere. Y'all need to follow up. You're professing to pursue laudable goals, affordable housing and mass transit, but missing middle isn't the best way or the best practice for Raleigh. Other cities might want to live that way, but Raleigh has its own character that we want to keep. Our established neighborhoods are a large part of the attraction of our city. If we remove the assurance of predictability of our neighborhoods from our city, then everything is in flux. If you want people to continue to invest in our neighborhoods, you have to offer the stability that missing middle has removed from our previous zoning. You were elected, and you turned over your authority to a staff that we never elected. You called your new law a national best practice, but you used it to take yourselves out of what you were elected to do. You're sitting up there because you were elected to run the city, not to delegate the responsibility. We want you to make the decision to protect established Raleigh neighborhoods by restoring Raleigh zoning.
Rob Steele.
Robert Steele, 5916 Osprey Cove Drive. My fiancée, Mary Marshall, was shot and killed less than a quarter of a mile outside of our back door in Headingham on October 13th at approximately 5:20 p.m. She was killed 11 days before her 35th birthday, 16 days before our wedding, and 18 days before her favorite holiday. A lot of factors contributed to her death. Some of them plain, dumb, bad luck. Our dog Scruff ran north on the trail instead of south after he slipped his collar. Some of them were preventable. For example, poor parenting, obvious mental health issues, and an utter lack of morals. However, of all these things and many others, I can't get past one thing that could have, probably would have, saved her life as well as the life of Susan Carnatz and probably Officer Gabriel Torres. This one thing I lay directly at the feet of the city of Raleigh and Wake County. There is no emergency alert system for ongoing violent crimes in our city. This is something that would be relatively easy to implement, as it could be piggybacked on existing weather and Amber Alert systems. The first 911 call on the 13th was placed at 5:09 p.m. Mary called me at 5:13 p.m., unaware of the incident taking place hundreds of yards from our front door. An alert sent out about an active shooter anytime between the first 911 call and approximately 5:20 p.m. would have most likely saved her life. She could have hit off the trail. She could have run. Instead, she died, and the blame for that is partly on you. I am calling here and now for your immediate resignations, and I have them here ready for you to sign. You sit here and you have these meetings where you discuss zoning, easements, and renaming of government buildings. But the citizens that you were elected to represent are dying in your city, and you've done nothing of substance to prevent it. So either resign or we force you out in 1 week.
Next, we have Dave Phillips. And Rob, I do want to say our hearts are with you, and we are terribly sorry for what happened. Dave Phillips.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councilors, and staff. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. My name's Dave Phillips. I'm the CEO of the Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors, representing about 11,000 realtors in the Wake and Harnett County areas. As we all know, Raleigh region is one of the fastest growing places in the country. Growth is the sign of a vibrant community, but growth also brings challenges, especially in housing our citizens. Much of the growth is and should be happening in our core city, but housing is a regional issue. What happens in Raleigh drives housing throughout the region. I'm grateful for the efforts of this City Council to expand housing opportunities by allowing more housing types to be built across the city. From middle housing, ADU policies, and transit-oriented development, this council has taken a stand to prepare for the growth that we will continue to see in the area. The Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors is committed to supporting initiatives that will keep safe and quality housing available for all. RAR promotes and educates realtors about housing affordability for the greater benefit of the community. Our research has determined that housing opportunities for our community can thrive on the availability of diverse and affordable housing options. So tonight, I'm here to thank you, City Council, for considering and implementing policies that provide diverse housing options in the city and advocating for and implementing the Affordable Housing Bond. We will always have work to do. We are hitting in the right direction, but we'll continue the effort. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your time tonight.
Next, we have Zainab Baloch. Zainab here tonight. Okay. Next, Jordan Forrest.
Good evening. I'm last, I think, so I'll try to be quick. But I'm Jordan Forrest Raleigh, 2802 Bedfordshire Court. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors. As an association, as Dave mentioned, we're committed to supporting initiatives that will keep safe and quality housing available to all. In my time with RAR, I have watched this City Council work diligently to provide for and plan for the growth of our region with great attention to ensuring that housing is available to all. You all have implemented forward-thinking initiatives, including the missing middle and accessory dwelling unit tax changes, as well as the $80 million investment in our community through the Affordable Housing Bond. Each of these are designed to support our city with the growth we are experiencing and the growing needs that have accompanied it. If we give these time to build momentum, these policies will take root and produce a variety of housing types at various price points to meet the needs of different lifestyles in our community. Tonight, I want to thank you for leading us through this growth thoughtfully and for joining RAR in our commitment to supporting initiatives that will produce safe and quality housing for everyone who lives in Raleigh and for everyone who will live in Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Zainab. Okay.
Good evening. I think there are some experiences that happen to us that change the way we think about issues and the way they impact us. Last week, I was visiting my friend to drop off food for her daughter. She's a single mom and she was working. And we were at Washington Terrace, and right when we were about to leave, we both got there. We were stuck and caught in the middle of a crossfire. I had a man pointing his rifle about to shoot right through our car to get to the other car, and not even man, sorry, two teenagers, and shot a 19-year-old teenager who then my friend provided first aid to. I've already had 3 childhood friends murdered and shot to death, executed, so I've already had trauma for the gun violence. But to live in my city and to have to continuously experience and hear about shootings the increase in shootings every single day, week, and to see city council not even have a group to address it, have any type of strategic plan, no plan at all to address the violence. Kids are dying, kids are killing kids, and nothing is happening. And I've seen that this is one issue that no one, regardless of your political side, no one sees this as good. There's only wrong in this. And so if we put our efforts into addressing, just like, we have a little bit of housing stuff, but like, what do we do for the youth? What are we doing about stopping this? Just like we put in measures for the pandemic. This is a pandemic. There's a war in our city. And I think, if there's, I don't know, I really wanted to share that experience because it's something else to be in the middle of that and really have to then go back to the spaces. And I feel bad most for my friend because she has to live there and sleep at night, and every night she talks about how she hears shots and there's another shooting. And I just want that to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of public comment for this evening. Next, we have our matters scheduled for public hearing. I'm going to take a break while people leave. Yes. Okay, everybody, we are ready to begin the public hearing portion of our meeting. First is the Convention and Performing Arts Center naming opportunity with Martin Marietta Center for the Performing Arts.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Carrie Painter, the director at the Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Complex. We are back after 2 weeks, and I just wanted to remind you of the hearing we requested for today. We have an opportunity for the naming of the Performing Arts Complex from Martin Marietta, which would name it the Martin Marietta Center for Performing Arts. It's a 20-year deal with 2 5-year extension options. The Beginning year is $518,000 plus a 3% escalator, and the end of the 20 years would come to $13.9 million. It's a Raleigh-owned company. We are delighted to bring this forward. We're asking you to hold the hearing this evening and then vote on the consideration for this opportunity. If you should decide to vote on it, then we would ask that you also allow us to incorporate it into this year's fiscal budget. Any questions?
Thank you. Is Mr. Nye here to speak on this?
He is.
Okay. If he could come up and say a few words. No one has signed up in opposition.
Sure. So
Okay.
then I bring to you the President, Chairman, and CEO, Ward Nye of Martin Marietta.
Okay, I'll open the hearing then.
Carrie, thank you very much. Mayor Baldwin, members of the City Council, it's an honor and privilege to be here this evening to talk about the Performing Arts Center and our community. Again, my name is Ward Nye. I'm the Chairman, CEO, and President of Martin Marietta. Like many of you in the S&P 500 company I'm privileged to lead, I'm a native of the Triangle. I was born here, educated, and have spent most of my life here, except for 3 years when I was in exile in Texas, and I found my way back. If you're unaware, I'll tell you just a bit about Martin Marietta, and that is we're a leading national provider of natural resources-based building materials, primarily crushed stone, sand, and gravel, but also in some markets, cement, concrete, and asphalt. In other words, you use our products every day, whether you know it or not. You find our products in your homes, they're in our roads, they're in our schools, they're in your places of work, they're in the hospitals, and much, much more. In other words, there's no form of activity from a building perspective that occurs without our products. Our company has nearly 10,000 employees in 30 states, Canada, and the Bahamas, with over 500 facilities coast to coast in the U.S. But our home is Raleigh. Our headquarters are Raleigh. This is where we've been since 1939, when our predecessor, Superior Stone Company, was founded here. And just last year, we moved our headquarters to a new location here in Raleigh in the Glen Lake Office Park off Laster Mill Road, in a development owned by another Raleigh-based company, Highwoods Properties. We have a history that we're proud of in partnering with communities. We're also among the earliest investors in the new Dix Park. In addition to the $1.5 million we've given, we're also donating 14,000 tons of stone for the Gibson Park area being constructed next year, and that stone has a value of approximately $500,000. We also made significant contributions to various groups in North Carolina, including the Carolina Ballet, the North Carolina Symphony, as well as our neighbor Shaw University to sponsor the Martin Marietta Faculty Fellowship Award to support the education of future business leaders at that school. You may be asking yourselves why we're interested in doing this now, and in short, it's a story of growth and a sense of duty to our community. We'll be celebrating our 30th year as a public company, and now is the right time for us to broaden the partnerships with our Raleigh community and more meaningfully demonstrate our fidelity to it. As so many of us know, the Triangle has grown immensely in recent decades as people from across the United States and indeed the globe have realized just how much our region has to offer. It's our hope that Martin Marietta's proposed sponsorship of this Center for the Performing Arts, which is our city's premier performance venue, will help Raleigh remain the vibrant, enlightened, and welcoming destination we've all come to know and appreciate. As a longstanding member of this community, we're also a strong advocate for it. As a large and still growing public company, our reach is nationwide, as well as here in the Triangle region, and we believe adding our physical endorsement of the Performing Arts Center will be positive and enthusiastic support for the city. Still, like any person, organization, or entity, we're imperfect. But as a company filled with people wholly committed not only to continuous improvement in all that we do, but also our company's 5 stated values of safety, excellence, integrity, stewardship, and community. Those are the reasons that we're here before you tonight and why we're excited about this opportunity for Martin Marietta, but most importantly, the city of Raleigh. Mayor Baldwin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1st, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment. That's
We're
the
on
wrong
Martin
one.
Marietta.
Yeah, we're on the first one. As I'm reading that, I was like, why is this is what I'm reading up? How about this? I move to approve.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously. I want to say thank you. I know being a homegrown company, I think you said it this way, sense of duty. And I really appreciate that. We don't have a lot of corporate headquarters here. So when we see one of our headquarters stand up and take a leadership role, it's great to see. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Whatever motion I just read, I'll just use it for the next one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have rezoning Z 2021.
Did you mean 80?
Z
I'm sorry, I'm
8021
like looking
Forum
at the agenda.
Drive.
I'm
I'm
confused.
sorry.
I'm sorry. It's like, what is she talking about?
I should have my glasses
Feeling
on.
really underprepared, Mayor. Bynum Walter, Raleigh Planning and Development. This is rezoning Z 8021 at 9500 Forum Drive. The request is to rezone just under 6 acres. This is going from commercial mixed use with a 3-story height limit to a 12-story height limit. The frontage is being removed and they're adding conditions. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. So you can see this is just east of Harvest Oaks along Forum Drive, northwest of Old Lead Mine. And this is a view of the site. There's a very large parking lot on the site here, and the retail and restaurant and grocery in the adjoining shopping center. There's a couple of views of the site from the street. So there's some conditions offered here. There are prohibiting uses. They've limited height to 9 stories. Remember, in our code, the jump to 12 goes from 7 to 12. So they're looking for something in between that. They've limited development around a trip budget. And then they have also specified a particular build-to range along Forum, and have said that at least 50% of the Forum Drive side of the property would be occupied by a building within that range. They're mimicking the parking limited conditions that were there, but actually removing the technical condition, selecting some aspects of that. They've prohibited surface parking between Forum Drive and the building within the build-to range, again mimicking that parking limited frontage. And they've added the building entrance facing Forum Drive again to mimic that condition. They've said that anything taller than 7 stories along Forum would have a step back of 25 feet, and then that the area within 100 feet of Forum Drive and with 125 feet of the eastern boundary can be no more than 5 stories. There are 2 additional conditions offered here, and I apologize they're not in the presentation. They are in your backup. If you want to look at the public hearing backup on page 24. One of them is limiting the linear feet of the building face in the build-to along Forum Drive, and specifying how height would be relate to grade there, and limiting themselves to 5 stories there. And then the final condition is providing for an outdoor amenity area on the property that is at least 750 square feet in contiguous area, is located at the ground level, and is contiguous to the Forum Drive right-of-way. So the entitlement here, you're seeing a significant increase in housing and office entitlement. This is consistent overall with the plan. Building height transitions was flagged as inconsistent because of relationship to adjacent development. It is consistent with future land use map and the urban form map, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. Can I answer questions for you before you open the public hearing and hear from the applicant and the public that have signed up to speak?
Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, we have 2 people who have signed up. One in support, speaking for the applicant, is Michael Birch. One person has signed up in opposition. So, Michael, do you have presentation or?
Yes, some brief comments, Mayor. I'm just going to use the city's presentation, but a few
Okay.
brief comments.
You
Ready
can
for me?
set the time, please.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the applicant for this rezoning case, local development group involving Michael Sandman, Andy Sandman, and Henry Ward. The purpose of this case is to facilitate redevelopment of the former Six Forks Cinema site, underutilized large surface parking area, and of course the theater building. Redevelop that for a apartment multifamily project adjacent to the shopping center that spans from Six Forks to Strickland Road, immediately to our north and east. So Bynum gave a great summary of the request. I want to note a little bit about the process and then a few specifics of the benefits and conditions that we've added. From a process standpoint, we met with residents, owners of the Cypress to our west very early on and made a number of concessions and conditions in response to their comments before even filing the rezoning. Of course, held our 2 neighborhood meetings and had a number of kind of offline discussions with other residents in the area and made some amendments to our conditions, particularly with regard to height in response to those comments. And of course, we work closely with Planning Department and Transportation on limiting our trip generation impact, but also ensuring that redevelopment of this site would be consistent with the urban form guidance suggested by the city in terms of bringing the building closer to the road, creating a more pedestrian-friendly and walkable environment, and kind of setting the stage for kind of the repair, as has been mentioned a few times, repair of these kind of older suburban shopping centers that are kind of slowly now starting to redevelop within our city. I want to note that, as Bynum mentioned, that this case is now consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use map, urban form map, consistent with the key policies concerning the reuse of existing shopping centers, the location of residential density in proximity to shopping and employment areas. Of course, we have the Forum development there to our southeast within walking distance, as well as the Colonnade offices across Six Forks Road. I'll note that our only inconsistency, that building height transitions, that actually only relates to the apartments on the south side of Forum Drive. That's the only policy inconsistency with this case. From a benefit standpoint, we are introducing new housing, not just new housing, but a new housing variety, more dense housing immediately adjacent to a shopping center with direct pedestrian and vehicular access into the shopping center and through the shopping center out to Strickland Road and Six Forks Drive. I want to note that there are legal requirements in place for this site to maintain at a minimum 2 points of vehicular and pedestrian access from Forum Drive into the shopping center. And so again, you can kind of see where those are located on your screen. And so there will continue to be kind of direct vehicular access, and then there will be improved pedestrian access from this site to the shopping center upon redevelopment. This reduces the need for vehicular trips on Forum Drive, particularly those that impact Forum and Six Forks and Forum and Lead Mine. It will enhance connectivity from Forum Drive to Strickland, and again, provide new residential within walking distance to transit available at Six Forks Road. Also, note this mixed-use center around Six Forks and Strickland that extends down to Forum and Colonnade is over 200 acres in size. Of that, only 14.5 acres are in residential use. 7% of this area within the mixed-use center is within residential use. So this case would provide more residential within walking distance to those existing shopping and employment opportunities. I also want to note that within 1.5 mile radius of this site, 7 square miles of this site, there's been only one new multifamily rental project built since 1996. And that was in 2013 on Six Forks, on the east side of Six Forks Road, south of Monument Lane. The other multifamily within this area was developed in 1985, 1990, and 1995. So for an area that's experienced a significant amount of growth in the city over the past 20, 30 years, the majority of that has been in a single-family development pattern. And so we are proposing to introduce, again, some additional rental opportunities in this area. And again, finally, with regard to traffic, because that was a large part of our conversation with residents and at Planning Commission, we have limited our trips slightly above what is already allowed by the current zoning. But we'll note that when developed as residential, there will be a significant amount of kind of internal capture trips that will not have to access Forum Drive in order to take advantage of the shopping center opportunity adjacent to us. So for these reasons, we would ask that council approve this rezoning case. Here to address any questions council may have, and reserve what time I have left if there's any questions or comments from the public that I might need to address. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cox.
I appreciate your comments, but I want to clarify. I know this area really well, and that shopping center there, those are the rears of those buildings. You got the rears of Food Lion, the rear of Home Depot. You got the rear of Target. This is not walkable. No one's going to walk all the way around to the other side of Food Lion and get their carts full of groceries and then walk them back to the apartment here. So, the argument that this is walkable is really a fallacy, in my opinion. The other concern that really hasn't been addressed is really the height. Multifamily is fine here. It's great to add density here. But in my opinion, the height is going to be too tall, and it's going to stick up like a gigantic finger above all the other stores, all the other buildings in this area. And I think it's an inappropriate height for this area. So those are my comments.
Thank you. We have, speaking in opposition, Marcia Stickford.
I'm Marcia Stickford. I live at 8031 Allen's Landing Way. Actually, I live about 2 blocks south and east of Forum Drive, and I use it a lot, like everybody in the area. So I signed up to sign in opposition, but in my conversations with other residents in the area, really, we're not opposed to the redevelopment of that site. That's clearly an underutilized site, and it was even before the movie theater closed. So I think actually neighborhood residents, area residents are excited about this site being redeveloped. And in particular, the fact that it's going to bring other housing opportunities to the area. I think that's viewed as a good thing. The concerns that Mr. Cox brought up are those that I think a lot of area residents share, which is that because it faces the back of that shopping center, it doesn't create more walkability. But I think the main issue is the height and overall just the mass of it in relationship to the rest of the area. And I actually sent everybody an email, so I'm not here to rehash everything that I put in the email. What I want is to ask you all, rather than considering this rezoning as a standalone sort of a project, is to think about it in the context of this area And if this, everything in this area is low-rise development, except for, the exceptions are a block of office buildings on Six Forks, and there are probably a couple of other buildings, including some buildings at Cypress that are over that. But even those buildings are set back from the road, surrounded by mature trees. And what this rezoning is asking is for this enormous building to be built. And if you look at the picture, you can see that how far the site is away from Six Forks. The site is actually in the middle of the block, and it's in the middle of 1 and 2, some 3-story development. So if you take that into consideration when you're thinking about the height they're asking for, that is a huge building, and I appreciated Mr. Cox saying it is. It's going to stick up like a sore thumb. And I think that what the area residents and the folks that I spoke to, what they would prefer is something that's more in keeping with the context, that's more in keeping with the scale of the rest of the area. And that will have not as much of an impact on the neighborhood. Right now, there are trees that are going to be removed. The site's actually on a 2-lane road, an unimproved 2-lane road. So I think that if you take all those factors into consideration, you'll see that this is really not an appropriate size for this particular area. So on behalf of other residents that I've spoken with, other comments that I've heard, and on behalf of myself, I'm asking you to please not approve this rezoning. Thank you. And I'm also going to reserve my time just in case.
Okay, take it back to the table. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Branch?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm trying to get an understanding. I see where part of the building is 5 stories on one part, 7 on another, and 9 at another. Can you kind of help explain that?
Absolutely. And so, first of all, let's see here. First of all, I wanted to, again, kind of realize that this site legally required to kind of be broken up, right, into a couple different areas just by the requirement to maintain access. So that, by virtue of that, right, breaks up the buildings, right? So it's not one mass building. Then the area that is limited to 5 stories, it's about right here. And the reason we limited this area to 5 stories is because that is the highest part of the site. So from this southeast corner to the southwest corner, there's about a 30-foot drop, right, because it goes down towards the creek. So this is the highest point of the site. So we've limited that area to 5 stories max. Then we have a condition, and again, it was one of the ones that wasn't in the slide, but we've said essentially no more than, kind of essentially half of the property within 100 feet proximity to Forum Drive can be greater than 5 stories in height. And again, so that's about 100 feet. Again, this is kind of the rest of it here. And I'll just note that, this area kind of right here is undevelopable because of sewer easements, et cetera. So, and again, this is kind of undevelopable, and there's about a 70-foot wide requirement here for access. So, you've got 5 stories where the blue is. As you're transitioning down, as you're going downhill, right, you kind of pick up some grade, essentially some stories below, right, and that's kind of turns into a 7-story building. And then to the extent that there is anything greater than 7 stories, it would have to be located kind of beyond that, kind of north of that purple line. But again, given construction, et cetera, and given the height limitation of 5 stories here, and kind of maxing out as you're going down the hill, right, practically, it's going to be capped at 7 unless you do a completely separate building back in the back, but that doesn't make much sense from a construction standpoint. So I do just want to highlight from a pedestrian standpoint, we'll be adding sidewalks along these access points through the site, and most of the people use kind of this pedestrian connection into the center, accessing here and here, as opposed to having to walk around that way. That's kind of how most folks use it today that are walking from this building here. So yeah, are those conditions in the kind of recorded instruments both break up the mass of the building and limit the heights of the building along Forum Drive.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? Okay,
Another comment about that.
Sure.
2-lane street, 5 feet behind the right-of-way, 5 stories up in one location, 7 stories up in another, and behind that, all the way up to 9 stories. If you know this area at all, that is a huge building in an area where everything around it is 1, 2, and 3 stories high. It's really inconsistent with the area, and it's it's just insane. It's just really inappropriate, and I hope you'll vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion here?
Yes, Mayor. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. Have that, clerk. All right, next we have rezoning Z5822, Alexander Town Boulevard.
This next request is to rezone just under 2 acres from industrial mixed use with 3-story height limit and a parkway frontage to remove the parkway frontage. The request is consistent with the future land use map on the comprehensive plan. The site has the airport overlay district applied to it currently, and that would remain, and Planning Commission recommends approval unanimously. So this is just outside, well, close, let's say close to Briar Creek. Alexander Town Boulevard, which is a little bit of a dead end. And this is a general use case. There are no conditions proposed. What would happen here with the entitlement, really the square footage is not going to change. The parkway frontage being removed means that the building could be set back farther from the street, and there could be more. There's no limit on the amount of parking that could be between the building and the street. This is consistent overall with the land use plan. There are a couple of inconsistent policies here. So there's a high impact commercial use, ancillary retail use, and location of industrial areas. So what's going on here is on the ground. In the real world, there is an adjacent townhouse community here. The entitlement of the range of use and the height is not changing, but the request is inconsistent because it's not addressing those issues, even though those issues already exist in the world. So Planning Commission recommends approval. Happy to answer any questions you might have. No one signed up to speak for this case, although, as I understand it, Christian Lungi, a representative of Anderson Jones, who's representing the property owner here, is available to answer questions from council if you would like to hear from Mr. Lungi.
Okay. Do we have any questions of staff? No questions? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
All in favor? Aye. That was unanimous, clerk. Next, we have rezoning Z2122, 5504 Rock Quarry Road. And no one has signed up in opposition.
Yes, ma'am. This is a request to rezone just over 28 acres from R4 to R10 with conditions. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, and Planning Commission recommends approval. So this site is west of Rock Quarry, east of Jones Sausage. You can see there's a large utility easement that runs through the site. There are a number of established neighborhoods to the north, east, and south here, and a couple of views of the site. So they've offered some conditions here. Residential density is not going to exceed 6 units an acre. There's a bike ped easement required from Quarryman Road toward the future greenway, and the developer has offered to conduct a TIA for site plans that exceed 100 peak hour trips. So the residential density here is really not changing significantly. They're at an existing R4 district, which with missing middle will allow a little bit more density. They're limiting themselves to 6 units per acre. Maximum units here is about 170 units total. This is consistent with the plan overall, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you hear from the applicant?
Councilmember Branch?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. One of the concerns in this area is dealing with a lot of the traffic. There's only one way in, one way out there. I know they're going to do a TIA, which will make certain requirements, depending on what the results are. But from a staff standpoint, have we looked at that intersection that comes out to Rock Quarry Road? And do we have any plans for any improvements?
Those are excellent questions. I'm going to defer to my good friend Jason Myers from Raleigh Transportation.
I was just talking outside to the president of the HOA there about this very issue. Again, Jason Myers in Transportation. The State Department of Transportation has programmed a traffic signal at that intersection of Interlock Drive and Rock Quarry Road. Unfortunately, I do not know at this moment when that might happen, and I don't know if we'll be able to find that out tonight. I suspect we won't, so if that's important, that's something that we'll have to follow up with NCDOT about. But it is their street and a city general practice to prioritize signals where DOT will not take any action, and we just don't have enough resources to prioritize their system as well.
Okay. If it's good to hear that the NCDOT does have this site on its map for a traffic light, can we find out where they are in this? I know there's a backlog on materials because I have another intersection that I'm waiting for NCDOT to put lights at as well. But if we can find out where this one falls, and in finding that out, I think it'll be helpful with the applicant in understanding that, because I'm not understanding. You'll get a chance to speak, hopefully, but what's your timetable as well of development? So that would be helpful. In life, things don't sync up, but the closer we can get, I think the better. So I'm good for now. I'll let the applicant speak and go from there.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh.
Open the hearing.
Excuse me.
Took things a little out of order, but go on.
Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, 27602. I'm representing Wesley Wood and his wife Kristen tonight, the owner of the subject property. Clyde Douglas, their broker and advisor, is here tonight.
Mr. Wood inherited this property and has decided that the city has now grown all around it. It's time to develop. As we heard, even though this property has a Rock Quarry Road address, and I have a presentation in here, if I can get to that. Well, I can probably use these slides. It doesn't actually front on Rock Quarry. You have to go sort of out Cowan and then up Interlochen to get there, or you could go down, potentially out down this way. The request is to rezone to R10 with a cap of 6 units per acre. You know, under Missing Middle, we probably could achieve more density there, but the R10 does give us some flexibility in the way it's developed, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. You know, we've met with the neighborhood a couple of times, and their big concern, as Mr. Branch called out, is traffic. We do believe that this development will you know, do some things that might help. One, you heard from Jason that that a NCDOT light has been approved, and also there's a realignment going on right now. The Barwell Pearl realignment down a little bit farther down Rock Quarry. You can't really see it on this map. I think that'll help matters too. But for this neighborhood, McCady Park to the immediate north, there were most of the neighbors who came were from that neighborhood. And we think there will be some advantages because there will be some stubs that will connect through here and maybe even through here. That will allow them to go through this neighborhood. And depending on which roads, I think we'll have to connect there and there. That will give them a way to get down out to Rock Quarry a different way. So I think that'll actually help their traffic. We do think it's reasonable in the public interest. It adds housing units. It adds a diversity of housing types. It facilitates infill. It's consistent with future land use and the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission, we added 2 new conditions. One was a greenway connection, which will be somewhere like that, and the other was a TIA if our development plan will exceed more than 100 trips per peak hour. In response to Mr. Branch's question, I can't tell you an exact timing of this development. Right now, there's not a developer that, and I can ask Mr. Douglas to confirm this. I don't think there's a developer on board at this point. So I don't think we have a critical need for approval tonight. I would like to have it approved. And honestly, even if we find out the answer from NCDOT, which I suspect we won't find out an answer, you know, I don't know how that's going to affect this case. I mean, if they said it was going to be done in 30 days, that would be great. But most likely, we're not going to get anything definitive, and it's not going to be that soon. So I would ask, you know, we're certainly very cognizant of that issue. We want to do what we could do to encourage that traffic light there, because I know that Rock Quarry does get very busy, particularly at peak hours. So we don't have a specific timetable of development.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
Is the hearing closed?
I will close the hearing.
Okay. If there are any other questions from others, from speaking with the president of the HOA, I think the major concern was the traffic light. And I think knowing that there's a plan for the traffic light and us continuing to work forward, and also hearing that even though you have the rezoning, you don't have a plan or development. Also, there's a condition that requires a TIA. Out of your TIA, there may be additional improvements that are required for this development to move forward. So with all of that being said, as well as that condition for me is key, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1st, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Next, we have rezoning Z2522 at 701 Corporate Center Drive.
This is a request to rezone just under 14 acres from office park with a 4-story height limit and a parkway frontage and a shod to CX7 with conditions. So that's the commercial mixed-use base district with a 7-story height limit. This is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan, but inconsistent with the future land use map. Planning Commission recommends approval, and you can see we're at the northwest corner here of Corporate Center and Chapel Hill Road. A couple of views of the site from the air and the street. So they've offered some conditions here. They've prohibited some of the uses that would normally be allowed in CX. They have provided for a 50-foot protective yard along the western boundary of the property that abuts the I-40 right-of-way, and also offered that for some extent of the Chapel Hill frontage. And then they have limited their uses by square footage, as well as the number of residential units. So they're limiting their entitlement here. And then they have also made specified the limits on parking between the building and the street. So the change here, residential density entitlement is increasing from 0 to 400. The office square footage is roughly the same. Remember, they've specified a particular square footage, and the retail entitlement is going down here. This is consistent with the plan overall. There are a couple of, always when the future land use map is inconsistent, there's a policy that goes right along that, right there with it. And they are also inconsistent with the design guidelines policy. If you approve this, the future land use map, if you approve the rezoning, the future land use map would be amended to expand the commercial mixed use that's to the east and south onto this site on the map. So that's this little place right here. And Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you hear from the applicant? Do we have any questions? Okay, I will open the hearing. There is no one signed up in opposition, and Chad Essick is here representing the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin, members of City Council. Chad Essick with Pointer Sproul, 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1900. I'm here this evening on behalf of Highwoods Properties, owner of the property at 701 Corporate Center Drive. As many of you know, Highwoods Properties is headquartered here in Raleigh. They own about 60 buildings in the Raleigh market with just over 6 million square feet. Joining me here this evening as the head of Highwoods is Raleigh Division, Skip Hill. So currently located on this site is a 4-story, 185,000 square foot office building with a significant amount of surface parking between the building and the public streets. This building was originally developed in the mid-1990s. If you look at the parcels, the 2 parcels to the north, they're also owned by Highwoods Properties. They have another 102,000 square foot office building at 801 Corporate Center Drive that was developed in the early 2000s. And then most recently, a 92,000 square foot office building at 751 Corporate Center Drive that was developed in 2018. So between these 3 office buildings, there's about 400,000 square feet of office. If you look across 54, you have a Sheetz and O'Reilly Auto Parts and McDonald's. And then across Corporate Center Drive, there's a multifamily development at the corner that's currently under development, nearly complete. And there's also a Hyatt Place hotel. So as you can see from the zoning map, and as staff noted, the current zoning is OP4 Parkway frontage with a SHOD 1 overlay district. The office park designation, well, obviously allows office uses and other civic uses. It does not allow any sort of retail uses, restaurant uses, or eating establishments. The parkway frontage that was applied to this during the city's remapping process in 2015, I think primarily because there was a SHOD 1 overlay district, that is inconsistent with the city's current urban form map, which designates this in a city growth center, as well as designates Corporate Center Drive and 54 as urban thoroughfares. So we're seeking to remove that frontage, and as I'll talk about in a second, replace it with some zoning conditions that mimic the parking limited frontage to limit the amount of surface parking between any new buildings we construct in the public right-of-ways. So really what's driving this rezoning request, in recent years, Highwoods is looking for a way to really provide walkable amenities for its tenants and surrounding uses where people can walk to lunch, grab a drink after work, and have kind of walkable retail and restaurant amenities close to where they work without having to get in their car. As some of you may recall who are on council, Highwoods did a similar rezoning and changes to some text to the Glen Lake Office Park to also introduce some eating establishment uses, brewery uses to help create more walkable amenities within their office parks. So this is what we're seeking to do here in this case. Really looking to develop. That's the surface parking that's in front of this office building, looking to replace it and eliminate some of it to put some retail shops, some restaurants, some places where people can go to, not just the folks that work in this 400,000 square feet of office, but the hotel across the street, the apartments on the corner, and the other offices along Corporate Center Drive that are in this area. I will note that staff has noted that we are consistent with urban form. We are consistent with the comp plan. There was a note that we are inconsistent with the future land use map. I will note that when we went to the Planning Commission, we were consistent with future land use map because the office and research designation allows you to go to this base district, but recommends that you prohibit residential uses as a part of that. So we had a condition that would prohibit any residential uses. The Planning Commission did not want to see us completely take residential uses out of the picture for this site. And so we removed that condition and then put a cap of 400 units as a part of our zoning conditions, which Planning Commission wanted us to do, which then made it inconsistent technically with the future land use map. So wanted to provide a little bit of context on that particular note. Just to talk about the process. We did have 2 neighborhood meetings for this rezoning case. We held the first one back at the end of February. We had another one, a second one in July. There were about 15 people that attended the first meeting. Those were owners of nearby retail, office, and hotel users, as well as some residents who live east of this site off Now Road and Now Point Drive. The feedback we received at those meetings was that we really need more retail and restaurant uses in this area. To serve the office users, the residential users, the hotel users, and especially given its proximity to PNC Arena and the lack of options for restaurants and eating establishments near the arena. So the feedback that we got was positive. At that time, we were looking to go to 12 stories, and some folks had some concerns about that. We ended up reducing that to 7 stories when we filed our rezoning application, and then we did not have anyone attend our second neighborhood meeting that we held in July. We also did not have anyone attend the Planning Commission meeting and speak in opposition to the case, and as staff noted, the Planning Commission has unanimously recommended approval, and I have not received any comments before tonight's meeting from anybody from the public. So with that, Mayor, members of council, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but we would respectfully ask that you vote to approve this case tonight.
Do we have any questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
Sorry. It's my motion to approve. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1st, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action. This approval is also deemed to be an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Seconded by Councilmember Knight. All in favor? Aye. Okay, that was unanimous, Clerk. I just want to say this is exactly the type of development and redevelopment we want to see. Creating walkable communities is better for our health, it's better for the environment, and I want to say thank you. Okay, next we have rezoning Z2922 East Millbrook Road, Paddock Drive.
That's right. This is a request to rezone just over 4 acres at the northwest intersection of Falls of Newson, East Millbrook Road on the south side of Paddock Drive. The current zoning here is office mixed use with a 3-story height limit and parking limited frontage. The rezoning request is for neighborhood mixed use with a 5-story height limit, urban limited frontage, and some conditions. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the future land use map, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. So this is just north of Quail Corners Shopping Center on the west side of Falls of Neuse. There are a number of conditions offered here. They've prohibited a handful of uses. They are regulating truck deliveries, the times and days that that's allowed. And then they are limiting hours of operation for personal service, restaurant, bar, and other retail uses on the property. They have also specified some limits on their development entitlement. So they're limiting themselves to no more than 20,000 square feet of retail, and they're also limiting the office square footage. And then they are making a step back requirement for buildings of 4 stories or more along in the build to along paddock. And then they have made a specification about vehicles exiting the site onto Paddock Drive, being limited to right turn only. So total residential density here is increasing, office entitlement is increasing, retail is staying pretty steady. This is consistent overall with the plan, and then the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing to hear from the applicant and the members of the public that have signed up to speak about this request?
What questions do we have of Bynum? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing. We have people, Molly Stewart is here representing the applicant. We have 4 people signed up to speak in opposition: Kevin Gard, Michael Valentino, Jill Barrett, and Shane Collins. I'm going to remind everybody that there's 8 minutes per side. So those speaking in opposition, please make sure that you leave time for each other. Okay?
Thank you. Good evening. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, here on behalf of the applicant. I just wanted to provide just a bit more background about the site, as well as walk you through some of the comments that we have heard throughout this process and how we've responded to those comments. Bit of a spoiler, the major concern in this area was traffic, and we were able to address that to some extent. As you're aware, the streets are a little bit outside of what we're able to do here. The site is obviously located at a major intersection here at Falls of Neuse and Millbrook, and there has been commercial use on this site, and in these buildings in particular along Millbrook since 1970. The request is for a modest increase from 3 to 5 stories, and the requested neighborhood mixed-use zoning not only matches the comprehensive plan designation, but is there to provide those neighborhood-appropriate uses and scale in this location. The existing zoning has a parking limited frontage, and you see that on your screen. And here we're requesting that urban limited frontage, which will have the effect of pulling the buildings up toward those major streets as the primary frontages. There are no zoning conditions on the property today, but we are offering several, and most of those in direct response to requests that we've heard from the neighbors. In particular, we had a long list of requested uses to be excluded from the site. We were able to accommodate all of those. We had a request that the hours of operation as well as the truck delivery hours should be restricted to match those of the recently rezoned property there to the southwest along Millbrook, and we included those restrictions as well. The intensity and density has been limited, which will limit the additional vehicle trips to and from the site. And I do want to spend a couple of minutes on transitions and buffering in this area. In particular, to the west, you see we have that mixed-use district up against an R district, so we have a natural neighborhood transition in that location. So to the west, we'd have that 50 feet of setback as well as an additional 50 feet of height controls. We've also heard a request to be consistent with city policy going to the north across Paddock Drive. And in that location, the policy is a little bit different, but we've also been able to meet that policy. The street itself provides somewhat of a buffer there, and we've also added a condition to include a step back above the 3rd floor there to provide that step down to Paddock Drive. I'll note that we heard a request a while back regarding a setback needed for the buildings themselves, in addition to the step back at that 3rd floor, to accommodate the needed sidewalks and street trees in this location. And we just wanted to note that those things will be required as part of the streetscape. If there isn't already room for them in the street, we'll be required to dedicate that space, and that will push the property line and take the buildings with it. As I mentioned, that urban limited frontage does pull those buildings up to the primary frontages along the major streets, and it does that by requiring that those frontages be occupied 50%, whereas along Paddock Drive, it's only 25%. So together with that step back, we feel that we've achieved that transition on both of those sides. We also heard an interest in ensuring that vehicles exiting the site onto Paddock Drive do have to turn right and don't kind of turn into the neighborhood there, that restriction has been added as well. I'd like to note that Steve Young is here with me tonight. He's representing the owner of 2 of the 3 adjacent residential parcels to the west. I'd like to turn it over to Steve.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Steve Young. I'm here today in support of Quail Commons development and their rezoning requests. As a manager and family member of the LLC that owns 2 homes behind this site, we view this project as a very positive step forward. We've been impressed with the design of the current building under construction, as well as the not just the front elevations, but all 4 elevations. They really look good. We see this as a positive investment for all the surrounding area, a dynamic, appealing design with services that make sense to the community, that address the fast approaching growth in a forward-thinking manner. We believe the intersection of Millbrook Road and Falls of the Neuse has tremendous potential to someday be a showcase of what a smart and well-planned development can look like. We see what is occurring at Quail Commons East, Millbrook, as a critical step towards this end. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Before you hear from folks, other folks to speak on this case, can I just follow up on questions we had from Councilmember Buffkin about sidewalk condition in this area from this afternoon?
Yes, please.
So you had asked about some overhanging growth, brush. So transportation staff was out this afternoon to look at that. The transportation staff can clear that this week. There is overhang in the right-of-way there. And then there's about 170, 180 feet of sidewalk missing between the new development and Paddock, at Falls and Paddock and Hearth, the 5108 Hearth. There's some clearing and grading that would need to be done there, and it would also impact some mature trees. And there is, it may be that a small wall might be required or more tree impacts to manage the slope back against the property. And there are some small bushes and ornamental rocks in the path along the frontage of 1206. There are also existing telecom pedestals there that we think we can work around. This is beyond the scope of current transportation staff capabilities, but transportation will approach the adjacent developer again about building this, including this into their site work with reimbursement. Alternately, we could bundle it with a sidewalk project elsewhere in the vicinity. So I just wanted to, I heard you, we all heard you, and wanted to come back to you with that information.
Well, thank you for that. That's pretty good service in about 5 hours. Good work.
Raleigh Transportation is great.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to ask the 4 who have signed up to speak in opposition. That would be Kevin Gard, Michael Valentino, Jill Barrett, and Shane Collins to please line up. And I'm going to remind you again that there's 8 minutes total. Please leave enough time for others to speak as well. And we'll start with Kevin.
Good evening. Kevin Gard, 1644 Standard Trail. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm grateful to be able to speak on behalf of the neighbors who would like to see this area redeveloped, but they have a number of concerns. And this includes that the zoning of 5 stories sets a new precedence for a development that uses narrow neighborhood streets, which results in forcing a significant increase in non-residential traffic on multiple narrow neighborhood streets, which is, of course, a concern for safety for drivers, pedestrians, children, and cyclists. And the current buffers, setbacks, and height transitions are not accommodating to the neighborhood surroundings. No precedence for 5 stories means that from the Midtown City Growth Center to north of I-540 on Wake Forest Road and Falls and Noose Road, there are no 4 or 5 story zonings which share narrow neighborhood streets. There are some 4 or 5 story zonings, but they're inside a mixed-use growth center or in a city growth center where there are upgraded streets. And of course, Z 2922 is not. The current 3-story building under development on the site, as you can see here, is 3 stories, but it also includes parking underneath. So opened up to the neighborhood, it looks like a 4-story building. And of course, and along Millbrook Road, there's a similar land grade that would allow 5 stories plus parking underneath that would open up 6 stories to the neighborhood. You can see in this rendering of what a 5-story building, which meets the UDO code, would look like, and accounting for the 3-story building that's on the site currently being developed today, along with structured parking that could be right up against Paddock Drive. And if you notice right there in the yellow circle, that is the 3 homes on the corner of Paddock and Fireside Drive, these single-family residence homes. Here are the 3 homes that are all decked out for Halloween last night. I've spoken with a number of these neighbors, and the one on the corner here is a young family who owns their home. They have young children. The mother she's very scared for the increased traffic that's going to come into the neighborhood as her kids are growing up, as they start playing in the yard and then transition to biking in these streets. They're going to have to deal with that traffic. There are other kids in the neighborhood that need to go to school. Millbrook Magnet Elementary is nearby, but children also bus. They'll come out to the street corners and use these streets around the site to get to school in the morning while people are arriving to the site to begin their workday, and patients are coming in for medical appointments for services in the new building. This site is part of Quail Meadows neighborhood, and all of the streets that service the neighborhood are neighborhood yield streets, which according to the Raleigh Street Design Manual service only 40 units. You have to go to a slightly larger street to serve above 40 to 150 units. And none of these streets do that. So we wonder how this 5-story development that's dense on the corner, it's going to pull traffic in. How's it going to utilize these streets along with the neighbors? And this includes Paddock, Saddle Court, Hearth, and Fireside Drive. I've already said this site's part of the neighborhood, and what happens here is that the other entrances to the neighborhood along Falls of Neuse and Millbrook Road have better access to those roads than all of the driveways around this site. And that's like a magnet that pulls traffic into the neighborhood. And so as we increase the density, that's the concern, that it's going to pull it in and we won't be able to we'll just have to live with that traffic. And this is due to the congestion of traffic around the intersection and also the traffic pattern changes coming from the Quail Corners expansion project to the south there. It's worth comparing this zoning to the Quail Corners expansion across the street, where it was 3-story zoning that was conditioned to 2 compared to a 5-story plus parking underneath. It is on a 3-acre site compared to a 4-acre site for this zoning. It was conditioned to 40,000 square feet of development compared to a maximum of 300,000 square feet. It was conditioned to a residential density of 4 units per acre, and now we could have 63 across the street. And if you notice to the south, there's a 50-foot buffer zone with trees and no cars to the residential homes that are to the south. And to the north, there's a 40-foot building setback where there's a 4-way entrance aligned with Hearth Drive and allowing for a bay of parking in the front.
I just want to remind you, there's 3 minutes left and others signed up to speak.
Last slide. Thank you. So given the intensity of the zoning request on a 4-acre site in this neighborhood, the neighbors request a traffic study or more discussion about how we can have effective means to minimize non-residential traffic. Consider changes like PL zoning with a condition for a bay of parking in the front along Millbrook to draw transient traffic in. Greater than minimum building setbacks from Paddock, and a buffering on that west property line on the north property that's right up against it. That's been requested by the landowner. Thank you. I yield.
We stop. Okay, there's 2 minutes, 17 seconds left. And do we have, are you Michael?
Yes.
Okay, and then Jill, I think I saw there. Is Shane, are you speaking?
Hi. These are people that live in the neighborhood. I want them to speak.
Okay, all right. So then The floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Thank you. All right. Hello, Michael Valentino, 5201 Seattle Court. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you today. I've been participating in the rezoning process for a couple of years and a refreshed appreciation for how complex it is to plan and guide city growth. This process seems way more complex than the billions of dollars of FDA-regulated facilities I have built. Am I the only person that sees the impending cumulative impact of the adjacent approved requests and other cases in this area? This isn't a standalone case. There's no precedent for this type of urban form building miles away from any city center growth. I think it'll even be taller than the closest hotel and maybe as tall as the hospitals, both of which have proper setbacks. I'm requesting the City Council encourage the applicant and/or transportation to listen to the community and take a little more time. We did work together and came up with one great condition about right turn on Paddock. We're willing to put the work in with whoever will help to incorporate the community requests. What I see is a dangerous precedent enabling anyone to simply ask for the maximum allowable with no plan to put anything anywhere, whether it fits or not, which ultimately destroys the character of Raleigh. It would be refreshing to see this process place proper value on what the people who live in the neighborhood request. It feels pretty much like the same thing any good neighbor would do any day of the week. I'd like to help solve the problem by planning now and not just pushing this along and hoping no one is killed. Thank you.
Good, hold that. Jill?
Thank you for your time tonight. I guess in the spirit of efficiency, I have only one wish tonight. I would like the council and the applicant to consider clearly documented residential-friendly setbacks with green space for any structure standing against paddock, not just at the 4th floor. My concern is when there's no vision for development, the worst is imagined. Currently, there are rezoning cases in various stages in all of the corners of Quail Corners, Commons, and Meadows. For my neighborhood, and I imagine the other Quail communities, the fear is another North Hills type of plan progression. I believe that sensible development with a true community vision can eventually prevail, a little more encouraged collaboration between designers.
I'll give you a little more time to finish. Go on.
A little more encouraged collaboration between designers and citizens would be a step in the right direction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any questions based on the comments? Councilmember Branch and then Cox.
I'm trying to understand the 4 stories setback of 12 feet. And I was looking at the diagram that they had. The two don't sync for me, so if you could help connect the dots.
Sure. I don't have the diagram that they produced. But what is required under our offered conditions is that although we're requesting the 5 stories along Paddock Drive, only the building face would only be 3 stories, so that there would be that 12-foot step back before it could rise to the 5 stories.
Okay, so basically along along Millbrook Paddock is
along
there.
Paddock, right?
Along Paddock, that side will only be 3 stories
That's right. 3 stories before the step back.
before the step back.
That's right.
Okay, so 3 stories and step back, and then you'll go 4. Okay.
Councilmember Cox.
Considering the property borders Millbrook and Falls of Neuse, which are 2 major roads, why do you need to have access? Why does your client need to have access to Paddock?
So this, I don't know that we've heard a request to completely block it. What we did hear when we first started talking about that access point was, concern about traffic going in the other direction. We heard some concerns from transportation staff as well regarding doing too much to design where that access point is.
We've had zoning requests in the past where conditions have been offered where an entrance would not be allowed. And so it's entirely conceivable that your client could offer a condition that there would be no access to paddock. And it seems to me that could be a solution for this going forward with the community's approval.
Sure. Like I said, we heard more specific requests than that, so we just haven't.
Councilmember Melton and then Buffkin.
I was just over here last week, had coffee at Deja Brew, and I have sort of two questions. Most of the shopping center is pretty active right now and fully leased. So is there a timeline on the redevelopment for this area? And then what is, you know, I was sort of struck when I was out there, it's very car dependent. And the built environment over there is it encourages people to drive because there's no other way to get to things. And, you know, I can envision a development here because it is really nestled into these neighborhoods that could provide walkable amenities to folks who live there if there's a way to make sure that the vehicular traffic is routed away from the neighborhoods, providing access for people who want to bike and walk and push their strollers. So those are sort of the two things at the top of my mind.
Great. Great question. So as far as timeline, no. So as many of you are aware, there is a building under construction today, and that will just proceed. It's under the existing zoning. With respect to the car-dependent nature of the area, Falls of Neuse is a transit emphasis corridor, and that is under the comprehensive plan what is driving the height request, the frontage request. Also, it ties into, this is sort of sitting at the very edge of the Midtown plan, where there is an area highlighted at this intersection for improved pedestrian facilities. It's not well defined. It could be sort of a high visibility crosswalk. It's unclear, but there is sort of a planning effort underway to improve the pedestrian experience at this location.
Councilmember Buffkin was next.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief word of context and the view from the district. There is a lot going on at this shopping center. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, there are two bus routes that go east-west on one east-west on Millbrook, and of course the number 2 on Falls. Early in this council term, we approved the redevelopment, what has been referred to tonight as the expansion of Quill Corners. That's the CX3 property on the south side of Millbrook. And shortly we will have rezoning across the street. And I think it was Mr. Young that said, you know, this intersection is developing into a rather lively and active place in North Raleigh. A lot of work has gone into this rezoning case up to this point. The access on Paddock is impacted by development that's already underway. Of course, they have a approved site plan, which required aligning the access with Saddle Court across the street, and that's where that limited right turn will go in. And everybody I've talked to about this has acknowledged that that solves the biggest problem with this case. And while it remains a close call, I think we will look back in the future and be glad that we approve this. We have worked through some concerns about the view from Paddock, and I understand the concerns, but with the adjacent property owner asking us to approve it and the additional information we've got with the buffers and the street trees and the potential for completing the sidewalk so kids can get safely out to Millbrook Elementary, it's going to be my request that the council approve this case tonight.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Councilmember Buffkin.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, that was Councilmember Fort and Councilmember Cox.
I vote no as well.
And Councilmember Melton. So it's 5-3. Okay, we have rezoning Z3122 on South Harrington Street.
Yes, ma'am. This is a continuation of the public hearing initiated on October 4. There's been no change to the request, and the applicant is requesting that this public hearing be continued to November 15. They are still in conversation with neighbors and evaluating possible revisions to the case.
How many public hearings do we have on November 15th?
I believe there are 10.
Is it realistic that they will have more to come before us on the 15th?
I can't speak to that, but the applicant is here and he looks eager to speak to you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question before he speaks? Bonham, how many do we have on that first meeting in December?
There are only a couple. I think there are maybe 2 or 3 at most right now.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. To give an update on where things stand with case Z3121, we met with Fairweather residents on October 20th. The deadline to submit signed zoning conditions for tonight's meeting was October 21st. And without having staff's input on any of those, we felt it was better to table it for 2 weeks to November 15th. I will say that we have come up with a substantial number of zoning conditions that we have sent to the planning department for review. They've given us their feedback and we're making the adjustments that they recommended. We've sent both the initial copy that we came up with on the 21st and this amended copy to the Fairweather as well for their review. But I do feel confident and expect that we'll have signed conditions in by this Friday's deadline for November 15th.
I'm concerned about the number of hearings we have that day. Would you be amenable to putting that on the first meeting in December?
I think we would very much like it to be heard on November 15th, but we'll defer to council's judgment given the existing caseload.
Thank you. I would then suggest that we move this for December, our first meeting, December 6th. That's a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That was unanimous. Thank you. All right, next we have rezoning Z 3422, Hillsborough and Grand Assemblage. Worth Mills is here for the applicant. We have 8 people who have signed up in opposition. I'm going to repeat this when folks stand up to speak. Please allow time for others, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, we'll start with the staff.
Thank you. This is a request to rezone just over 3 acres from R10 and NX3 with park limited frontage, so just mixed split zoning here, to across the board neighborhood mixed use, 5-story height limit, urban limited frontage with conditions. This is just on the north side of Hillsborough Street, just west of the Youth Center Drive and just west of the fairgrounds. The request is consistent with a comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission does recommend approval here. So you can see here the site. This is bounded by Dorcas on the north side. And here are some views from the street, all 4 corners of the site. So they have offered some conditions here. They've prohibited some uses. They've said that non-residential use would only be permitted within 120 feet of the Hillsborough Street right-of-way. And they have said that non-residential uses cannot exceed 60,000 square feet. And of that, the retail sales, indoor rec, personal service, and restaurant and bar cannot exceed 25,000 square feet. So they're basically saying the other non-residential use there would be office. And then they have prohibited drive-through and drive-in facilities. And then they have also offered a right-of-way dedication. No, they're limiting building height, not more than 65 feet for a portion of the site. And then they have also limited materials, and they have provided that they will include vehicular ingress and egress along Youth Center Drive right-of-way, subject to city approval in any future site plan that they submit. So the increase in residential units goes up to about 180. The office square footage is not going up that much because they've limited that, and they're also limiting their retail square footage. So the likely bulk of the use here is going to be those units. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. There are a couple of inconsistent policies here around mixed income neighborhoods and housing diversity. They're not offering any affordable units as part of their proposal. The Planning Commission recommends approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have before you hear from the applicant and others that are signed up to speak to you about the request.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, I will open up the hearing then. We'll start with Worth Mills speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Worth Mills, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, 27607. I'm joined by John Linderman with the applicant team, as well as Brindy Vega with Withers Ravenel. The rezoning of this assemblage from neighborhood mixed use, 3 stories, parking limited, and residential 10 units per acre to a neighborhood mixed use, 5-story height limit, urban limited frontage, and conditional use is requested to permit a multifamily project with ground floor, retail, and commercial space along Hillsborough Street, a street that is designed for frequent transit and near a future transit station. The plan is consistent with the future land use map, the urban form map, and the comprehensive plan overall. It was unanimously recommended for approval by Planning Commission, and we believe that this request is both reasonable and in the public interest. So as Bynum mentioned, this property is the entire block that's formed by Hillsborough, Youth Center Drive, Dorcas Street, and Grand Avenue. I'll point out this portion of Dorcas does not currently connect to Youth Center Drive, and so most are relying on this intersection here at Youth Center Drive in order to exit Westover and travel north. As Bonham also mentioned, this property is across Youth Center Drive from the State Fairgrounds, and the Westover neighborhood is located to our northwest. So the properties along Hillsborough Street are the ones zoned for neighborhood mixed use. Currently, those that front along Dorcas Street are currently zoned R10. Most of the other properties along Hillsborough Street, kind of at the edge of the Westover neighborhood, are also zoned for neighborhood mixed use, and the predominant zoning district within this area at large allows for either light industrial or heavy industrial uses. So the future land use map recommendations mirror that existing zoning on our assemblage, with the northern properties designated for moderate density residential, the southern properties designated for neighborhood mixed use. But the future land use map in the area at large recommends a greater variety of uses along this stretch of Hillsborough than what currently exists today. We have offered 2 zoning conditions that further the request's consistency with the future land use map. Those being that non-residential uses are going to be permitted only on the southern portion of the property along Hillsborough Street. And we are going to limit building height to 65 feet in the northwest portion of this assemblage. I think because of those 2 conditions, we are furthering our consistency with the future land use map. These properties are also within the frequent transit area of the Western Boulevard corridor and the planned BRT route. We are surrounded by the Arena, Blue Ridge City Growth Center. You can see kind of encircling this property and the Westover neighborhood. In addition to the urban limited frontage and the enhanced pedestrian network around the perimeter of this assemblage, the rezoning could provide the increased densities that would permit and support transit investments and provide opportunities for residential and economic development. This slide shows the offered zoning conditions as well as the exhibit that corresponds with our height condition. The common theme of these conditions is to mitigate any impacts to the Westover neighborhood. Condition 2, as I mentioned, prohibits non-residential uses on the northern half of the assemblage. We've set both individual and aggregate caps on non-residential space, as Bynum mentioned earlier. Condition 4 was added at Planning Commission, which prohibits drive-throughs and drive-through facilities to further consistency with the urban form map and the Western Boulevard corridor. Condition 5 sets a maximum building height of 65 feet within the red shaded area as opposed to the 80 feet that would otherwise be allowed for a 5-story zoning. Condition 6 lists permitted building materials, and condition 7 I think is very important. The main concern, or certainly one of the main concerns that we heard at our neighborhood meetings and at Planning Commission, was on the traffic that currently exists during the fair, football games, any events at the Carter Finley PNC Arena. And so in addition to making this connection to Youth Center Drive, we are also going to require a driveway cut leading out to Youth Center Drive, subject to the city's approval. But the outcome of such a driveway cut on Youth Center as opposed to Dorcas is we will probably have a corresponding driveway cut here, which is going to keep almost all of the traffic going north on Youth Center outside of the Westover neighborhood, or if they want to travel south, traveling through maybe 300 feet of the existing Westover neighborhood to get to Hillsborough Street. So the impacts that this development would have on Westover traffic interior to that community, we think should be minimal given how we want to orient the development and orient our driveway access. And so to summarize, this rezoning fulfills many of the city's goals for increased development along the Western Boulevard corridor while mitigating impacts to the Westover community. With building height, building materials, the location of non-residential uses, and the vehicular access off Youth Center Drive and the connection of Dorcas to Youth Center Drive. As I mentioned, it's consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, and we believe, again, it is consistent or reasonable and in the public interest. We appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Worth? Okay. I'm going to call Louis Shiner, Sarah Carter, Jill Heffinger, Brian Pipiak, John Nottingham, Margaret Lawrence, Mark Winstead, and Lori Mayer. We'll start with Louis Schreiner. And again, I'm going to say, please be cognizant of the time so all people have a chance to speak.
My name is Lou Shiner, and I live at 202 Grand Avenue, just on the other side of Dorcas from the proposed development site. I've lived in Westover for 19 years. If you leave here with one word in your heads today, I would like that word to be infrastructure. The infrastructure simply does not exist to support the kind of massive development proposed for this location. Our streets are heavily patched, cracked, and crumbling. When two big pickup trucks have to pass each other, one of them has to swerve off of the pavement. When it rains, it floods. First the streets, then the lawns, than the crawl spaces in the basements. During the state fair, football and hockey games, concerts, and other events, traffic is already unmanageable. This development would bring it to a complete standstill. There are no sidewalks in the neighborhood. There are no safe places for children to walk or ride bicycles. Increased traffic translates to increased risk for our kids. I'm asking on behalf of myself and my neighbors that you delay or reject this rezoning proposal until there is a reasonable plan in place to provide the infrastructure the proposal requires. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Sarah Carter. Sarah Carter.
Yes, I'm Sarah Carter. I'm not part of the 8 minutes of the opposition. It got changed to support.
But you're not in support.
Right. No, I'm in support. I'm in the supportive minutes. I changed it on Friday with Brenda.
Are you supporting or opposing the case?
I'm going to be speaking in a supportive capacity.
Supportive of the development?
Yes, so that they can speak. They got their 8 minutes.
No, you're switching it.
I switched it on Friday with Brenda, I believe it was, the city.
So are you speaking in support, though, or in opposition?
I'm gonna do, it's a supportive kind of thing, talking about an issue with the Dorcas Street. But it's to the city, it's supportive.
It's opposition. You're in opposition. She's supporting us.
Right. So what you want to do is, what I'm here reading between the lines here is you're trying to use part of their time.
I'm letting them have their time, and I'm going to have time to.
No, you want to use part of the applicant's time.
Yeah.
All right. If you start speaking, though, in opposition, I'm going to have to cut you off because that would be inappropriate use of our rules.
That'd be fine with me.
Okay.
That's not what I'm going to say is.
All right. If you could have a seat, we'll call you when this is done.
Sorry for the confusion.
Jill Heifinger.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jill Hevinger. I live at 201 Grand Avenue. I am directly catty-cornered from the development that's going in. Just am going to say something really quickly, just to kind of echo what was just mentioned. There is no infrastructure. We have ditches and culverts for stormwater. We have no sidewalks. I have a 7-year-old daughter that when we go down the street, if she is on a bike or a scooter and 2 cars or a delivery truck or a school bus come, we have to jump into someone's ditch or yard to move safely out of the way. Our neighborhood does not support the traffic that will come from any development. I am 100% supportive of development to help Raleigh grow, but there has not been enough traffic studies or enough research done for our specific neighborhood to support this happening tonight. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, Brian.
My name is Brian Pipiak. I live at 213 Grand Avenue, just within sight of the development, and it is quite simply just too large for our neighborhood. As I explained earlier, you can't pass 2 cars full size next to each other without one stopping and allowing the other one to go by. It's not safe. A few days a week, I ride my bike to work downtown here. The most difficult and unsecure part of that journey is just getting out of the neighborhood across Hillsborough Street to get to Powell, so I can get away from all the cars. It was not designed for pedestrians or bike friendly at all. The infrastructure is just not there to support something of this size. It would, as proposed, just devastate this neighborhood that we all really love living in. And I can't tell you how much enough it's a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you. John Nottingham.
Yes, my name is John Nottingham, and I live at 205 Grand Avenue. I'm just 3 doors down from the western corner at Dorcas, where this development is proposed. And I had really hoped that they would do more to mediate the height and the setbacks adjoining the neighborhood, but my main concern is traffic and illegal parking on Grand Avenue. Grand Avenue is the main exit out of the neighborhood onto Hillsborough Street. There are only 3 ways in and out of the neighborhood: Grand, Marsh, and Merritt. And Merritt goes out on Youth Center in the opposite direction. Marsh is a very dangerous intersection right near where 54 Highway splits off of Hillsborough Street. So the main way to get out of our neighborhood onto Hillsborough Street is Grand Avenue. So when the gentleman said that they would have traffic going out that way to Grand Avenue, that's going to increase the amount of traffic where there's no stoplight or anything, and it's really difficult to get out as is. The other thing is, if they can go that way, what's to keep them from turning and going the other way and going into the neighborhood down to Merritt Street and going out on Youth Center that way? So that will not discourage the occupants from driving through the neighborhood at all. The other concern I have is illegal parking. There's no legal parking in Westover. It's just a lane. There's no parking signs up and down the street everywhere. And this is just anecdotal, of course, but some similar development on Hillsborough Street near where Daisy Street and Dixie Trail come out. You have 5-story buildings with commercial on the ground level. And they have a lot of people, this is from anecdotal and people I've talked to, an observation, people are going to have cars. And if they don't have a place to park in the development, they go to the streets that are adjacent and park on the street. And in those neighborhoods, there are legal parking places on the street. But in our neighborhood, there isn't. So I'm concerned about residents who don't have a parking place in that complex using our street to illegally park on.
There's 2 minutes left with 3 more people
Okay.
to speak. Margaret Lawrence.
Thank you. I'm Margaret Lawrence. I live at 215 Marsh Avenue, and I am in opposition mainly because of the traffic. We are an event location, and during those events, they have to support the traffic by bringing in police officers to direct traffic, and that's the only way that it will work, or it'll completely be congested. Also, he said that they will be putting traffic out on Youth Center amongst city approval. That is not a city road, that is a state road. And they have denied approval on that road before to developers. And then I am a biker, I'm a pedestrian, and it is very difficult just to get out across Hillsborough Street. Hillsborough Street has not been updated between, they don't have a plan to update it between Blue Ridge and where it meets up with Western. There's no side of the road. They're just drainage ditches, and it's very dangerous. So just.
Thank you.
The infrastructure is not there.
Mark Winstead. And we have one more after, so there's 1 minute, 6 seconds left.
I gotcha. Mark Winstead, 816 Historian Street in Raleigh, but I own 5200 Dorcas, which is at the very end of Dorcas and Youth Center. I'm in that corner. It's a very dead-end street there, and you cutting traffic through there is going to make it a nightmare. It's going to bring lots of extra traffic, people cutting through and all the events and activities and the fair. There's no parking around there. You can't park on Hillsborough Street, Youth Center, Grand Avenue, or Dorcas. So I ask you, please do not allow this to go through. It is not ready for all this traffic. Thank you.
Okay, and Lori Mayer.
Good evening, folks. So very briefly, we will say that our neighborhood, the older homes in our neighborhood, I'm in one of the newer homes, many of those households are sustained by event parking. I had one neighbor who parked over 1,800 cars during the state fair. That's the volume of cars we're talking about during events. And that is one landowner of dozens. And I'm not trying to stop that. I'm not trying to prevent these households from using or marshaling their resources. The issue is, or the reasons I'm opposed to this rezoning application is because the city of Raleigh has been treating this process like the Wild West. You guys approve things, and our neighborhoods have to pay the cost. We don't have the infrastructure. They haven't made enough conditions or concessions, and we need more. And it starts with you guys, and you have to do this. This deprives our neighborhood the opportunity to get more conditions.
Trying to get you to, like,
Thank you.
You've already gone over your time, so.
I said thank you.
All right, thank you.
One last thing. Could everyone from Westover raise their hand who's opposed to this?
Mm-hmm.
We're all voters.
Thank
We're all
you.
registered.
Sarah Carter. Okay, this is time left on, in support.
Yeah, okay. May I start?
Where were we?
Or,
1 minute. Just 1 minute.
is it, how much more time do I have?
Well, and I'm going to stress this again. You said you're speaking in support.
I'm speaking in support as if this were going to be passed, and I'm asking the city for consideration that I don't see in the considerations about the streets. So it's actually something that, as if it were passed.
Okay.
I want to ask the city to never connect Dorcas Street and Youth Center. It's not in there right now, and I don't know if this is a public comment, one to bring forward to another meeting and say, how do you?
I would suggest you email us because you're not speaking in support. You're pretty much reiterating what your neighbor said. So
Not specific. Well, I'm looking at item number 7, where it said that the city, the consideration of the Dorcas Street not connecting, it's actually, they don't say that Dorcas Street will never connect. And, but I don't, the youth center connection, there's no site plan. So I'm just trying to put on the city to, assuming that it zones
This
through.
isn't part of the site plan. It comes for site plan approval after the
So-
rezoning.
So I would have to come forward. Just want to, that's my slide up there, not the oppositions, and that's mainly what I wanted to talk to, just never connect it through,
Okay, thank you.
But hopefully that, sorry for the inconvenience and
Well,
misunderstanding.
You're speaking in opposition, but that's okay. I'm going to put time
It's
back
just a
on.
consideration.
Ma'am, I'm going to put time back on in case. Worth, do you have any additional comments that you would like to make in response to what the opposition has said?
So on the illegal parking, we do anticipate having a parking structure wrapped by a mixed-use building. I would like Brendy Vega with Withers to discuss stormwater requirements and any specifics on traffic, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendy Vega with Withers Wrap Now, 137 South Wilmington. We have done a preliminary stormwater concept for the site, and we understand it is a concern. Underground treatment would be used on this site for quantity and quality. And the pipes that are shown on Dorcas now, we see those are culverts and not actually stormwater connections. So there is insufficient existing stormwater infrastructure. So we would plan to detain the quantity and the quality underground. As far as traffic, we have not done a traffic impact analysis. It was not required during the rezoning.
Right.
We do understand that it is a concern of the neighbors and would work with staff to do a TIA.
Are you willing to make that a condition?
So the TIA, we would like to continue that at site plan review when we know the number of units, the number of commercial space that would be included in any plan. I will note that the AM and PM peak hour difference between existing zoning and current zoning is 56 trips, both in the morning and in the afternoon. Thank you.
Councilmember Melton?
I actually have a question for staff. I'm just curious, so as an NC State fan and graduate, I'm very familiar with this area. I've walked it. I've probably parked in one of these yards, paid $5 or $10 to do that. I saw someone put up, I think Worth put up the future BRT route, or I think even commuter rail may be coming through there at some point. Is there going to be is there any plan to do any improvements on this stretch of Hillsborough Street? Is there going to be a requirement to do it for bus rapid transit? Because there are no sidewalks. A lot of people walk here. It's a lot of ditches. It just seems like with development coming in this area that we should have a plan for that. I'm just curious if that is in the works or not.
So the BRT alignment right now is south of here on Western.
Right.
Right? That's the station area planning that we're working on, just gearing up for right now. That's in about 30% design. And that alignment is south of here. And functionally, the railroad means that there's not great access there. But functionally, the railroad means that if there were commuter rail here, that it would likely use that track. And then ongoing conversations about the S line, I believe, also would deliver service on this same track. And so I think, neither of those projects is funded right now. There's a lot of uncertainty around the S line. Is that commuter or passenger rail service? What's the nature of the S line going to be? And then commuter rail, is in conversation right now. There are a lot of questions about costs and ridership and feasibility of that. That's, I would say, is a possibility, but not something that we're really adapting our land use plans around just yet. There's not,
I didn't mean to
certainty
direct
there.
the discussion to commuter rail, because I'm just forecasting it's going to be there. But with the BRT, I understand it's on Western, but I do know that with our existing route for New Bern, for example, we're looking at that first and last mile connectivity to BRT stations. And so when you look at the station area planning, it reaches out beyond New Bern into the neighborhoods and provides, for example, where I live, there's going to be some sidewalks added because we're kind of close to a BRT stop. But you're kind of saying that because of the railroad there, that's going to be tough to do for Hillsborough Street?
Well, there's not great pedestrian connections there. There was work done through the RCRX study.
Okay, Councilmember Branch.
Questions for transportation is two parts. The first one is what upgrades would have to be made to Grand and I guess I don't want to say it wrong. Dorcas. Adjacent to this property, because I know that's something that tends to happen on projects. The second part is I know there's some changes that are going to be made to Powell Drive, which is not far from here. I'm looking at this map. Powell Drive is right here, and this is the property. And then lastly is, and this may be more for the applicant, you already have curb cuts off of Hillsborough Street onto the property. Were any of that considered in order of making connections from the property straight onto Hillsborough Street? So I think 2 for you and 1 for the applicant.
Jason Myers in Transportation. I was just trying to understand how a site plan would be reviewed in terms of what the street type would be required to be upgraded to, but on all of the frontages of all 4 sides of this block with a Tier 3 site plan, they'd have to widen it to the half of their standard, put in curb and gutter in the streetscape, which is at least a 12 or 14 foot, tree lawn with a sidewalk. So if it's determined to be a neighborhood yield street, which is our narrowest standard, I think this is roughly 8 or 16 feet wide. That would be about 5.5 feet of widening kind of along here to create space for on-street parking on that frontage and then the sidewalk into that. If it were determined it needed to be a wider street, then it would be a little bit more than that. And so that's on all 4 sides meeting the standards. And on Hillsborough, it's designated as a 4-lane divided right now. That was question 1, and I already forgot question 2. I apologize. Powell. Yes. Powell Drive, I'm going to find a map in here, there was a study done jointly by Campo, Raleigh, and Cary, called Raleigh-Cary Crossing Study, RCRX, and that laid out a bunch of long-term railroad crossings, and one of those being connecting Powell to Youth Center, roughly along that alignment. Keeping the corner of this to help facilitate that as something that would be a site plan consideration. That is not a funded project or something that's programmed. I'm not sure that this is the most cost-effective one of those grade crossings. Each one of those is a very expensive project, and I think NCDOT is going to be involved in starting to work on that with us and with the town of Cary as well. And I actually think I might be able to answer one element of this. I believe there is, actually, I will not, I'm going to check and maybe respond to him so I do not misspeak.
Okay.
Councilmember Branch, was your question about having a driveway cut off of Hillsborough Street?
Yeah, because currently I'm seeing 2 current driveway cuts straight onto Hillsborough Street on these current properties.
Absolutely. And those curb cuts, I'm sure, were built prior to any frontage requirements, any type of urban design standards. And with this site, we're proposing to go to an urban limited frontage, which is going to require this building to be within 20 feet of Hillsborough Street, creating that pedestrian or greater pedestrian feel. I believe the urban limited sidewalk requirements recommend either a mixed-use street or a main street, so that would require at least an 8-foot sidewalk, at least along Hillsborough. I'll let Mr. Myers talk about what sidewalk requirements and those widths may be required on streets like Dorcas and Grand, although I would imagine they would at least be 6 feet. And like any other development, when you've got right-of-way to dedicate or sidewalks to build, that gets done almost always through private development and individual projects as opposed to public funding or these kind of large-scale plans. We try to model and focus that development based on those plans, which I think helps accomplish those infrastructure goals at the expense of the developer as opposed to having to use those public funds. But back to the Hillsborough Street driveway cut, I don't think that would be consistent with the urban limited frontage or the type of development that the urban form map would call for in a place that's within a frequent transit area and within a half a mile of a transit station area. But again, wanting to make the connection of Dorcas to Youth Center, wanting to try to get a driveway or a parking garage access to Youth Center Drive, I think, and you can see it better here, how that can take any traffic or almost all traffic that's generated by this development and keep it on the periphery of, or the peripheral of the Westover neighborhood by using Youth Center Drive and only having to drive a short distance to get to Hillsborough Street.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cox.
Well, first of all, I just want to be sure that everybody has a real understanding of the process. The public process ends with zoning. Once the zoning is decided and if it's approved, then when this goes to site plan, there is no public process. Everything will be approved or not approved entirely through staff review. You might have your opinions and you can email and all that, but it won't be considered. So I just want to be sure that you understand that process. Secondly, regarding access into this site from Hillsborough Street, and there are office buildings, there's some on Blue Ridge, that you have a right in and right out onto the property from, like from Blue Ridge or Durley or wherever. You could have right in, right out from Hillsborough Street into this property. And I'm wondering if you could have a condition for that and not have access off of Dorcas.
Not having access off of Dorcas and
Dorcas and Youth Center.
So just keeping access to Grand and Hillsborough?
Just Hillsborough. Yeah, I think
don't think that would.
there's a difference between a driveway versus a right in and a right out.
I don't see how that would be compatible, but I'll let Ms. Vega add her thoughts.
I think having a right out only would circulate the traffic through the neighborhood if they couldn't make a left out. They may, not be able to make a left out and then enter the neighborhood to get to their desired path. Also, I think Jason is looking up the distance for a driveway from the intersection, which we haven't explored a lot because we haven't gotten into site planning on this site. But there is a spacing requirement for intersections. So any driveway would have to be reviewed and approved by NCDOT and the city.
Councilmember Fort.
Go ahead, Jason.
I apologize for interjecting. The site frontage is about 400 feet wide, and our standard is that a driveway on a major street, and Hillsborough is a major street, must be 200 feet from the nearest intersection. So that's right there on the line of whether that is just barely allowed in the middle or not allowed at all. That said, both Youth Center and Hillsborough are NCDOT streets, and I think NCDOT is going to be much more concerned about driveway access onto Hillsborough and probably not very concerned about it on Youth Center. I'm pretty confident there's certainly enough space on the Youth Center frontage to put a driveway, and I don't believe NCDOT would have any concern about that, especially given the trade-offs of potentially having access on Hillsborough.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, there seems to be like a lot of issues that have been raised by folks in the community as relates to stormwater, traffic issues, and some other things. And so it would be my suggestion that we keep the hearing open and give staff, the applicant, and the community the opportunity to have some additional conversations. And so move this to the first meeting in December.
Councilmember Buffkin.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment briefly on this condition of the road. You all have my sympathy with this situation. No curb, no gutter, no sidewalk. I would want you to know there's streets like that all over this city, and you're not alone. I know that's not comfort to you, but everything I heard about this project is going to make that situation better. And it is, and all the traffic analysis and all the transit engineering.
Please let him finish speaking.
And
No one he did not interrupt you when you were speaking, okay? Let's just show some respect. We're trying to work with you.
And everything I've seen about this project is going to make that better. Sidewalks on Youth Center, an improved street front on Hillsborough, more traffic connections means less congestion. This is a good project, council, that should be approved tonight.
Like the- So you have asked that this be moved to the first meeting in December?
That's correct.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Branch. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. So we'll continue this until that time. What I would, I think there's a lot of questions, and I think we need answers. So if you could continue to work with the neighborhood, but also NCDOT, traffic, our transportation department, whatnot, I think that would be very helpful. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. All right, we now have rezoning Z5122, 7725 Buffalo Road.
This is a request to rezone 4.5 acres from R4 to neighborhood mixed use with a 3-story height limit and conditions. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but inconsistent with the future land use map, and the planning commission recommends approval. You can see we're at the northwest corner.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's just wait a minute, and could we reset the timer? Actually, we're not going to need it. There's no one signed up in opposition. No one has signed up in opposition on this case, so we will have staff. What?
I'm just real happy.
Okay.
So this is Z5122 at 7725 Buffalo Road. This is a request to rezone 4.5 acres from R4 to neighborhood mixed use with a 3-story height limit and conditions. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan and, but inconsistent with the future land use map. Planning Commission recommends approval. And this is the northwest corner of Old Mill Bernie and Buffalo Road. This is an aerial view of the site and a couple of street views of the site as well. So they have offered some conditions here. They've specified permitted uses. They have specified a maximum of 1 access point on Buffalo and 1 on Mill Bernie. And then they have limited their retail uses to no more than 20,000 square feet. So the result here is about well, the retail is held at 20,000 square feet, and because they have prohibited uses, they're looking at a limited number of uses here, limited number of residential units here. So this is consistent with a number of policies, a couple inconsistencies here, conditional use district consistency, future land use map, and zoning consistency. Those always kind of trigger together when you have a future land use map and consistency. And then there's zoning and infrastructure impacts concern here as well. Nonetheless, Planning Commission recommends approval. I would be happy to answer questions for you before you hear from the applicant.
Any questions?
I just want to say the quicker this goes, the faster I can make a motion to approve.
I'm done.
Okay, I'll open the hearing, close the hearing.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1st, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and am I reading? Oh, no, I'm not reading the right one. I did his thing.
You did what I did.
I did what he did.
You got so excited.
Oh, there's a, where the heck is it? The document attached to the agenda item is for a comprehensive plan approval. Let me find one that
Robin, do you have it?
I'm pulling it up right now.
I think this will work. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated November 1, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.
And for the record, I did not do it, Jonathan Melton.
You do not what?